Hello. Are you here?
Hello.
Okay, good. This is my first time inviting someone in, so I had to make sure I let you in.
Hello.
Hello. There's my head. Let me put my head in there. There's my head.
Dar.
There.
How you
Hi.
doing?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I too I'm not like a Zoom wizard either. I mean, I use it some, but I'm not great with all the
I'm
various features.
I'm a Zoom novice. I'm
Okay.
getting there.
We'll learn together.
Thank you. I'm gonna save some of my conversation for when everybody gets here. Uh,
Yeah,
Let me mute myself so I can answer the phone.
I'll do the same. Tommy, it looks like your microphone is off.
Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, Tom, yeah, I can't hear you either.
Yeah, I can hear you, Michael.
All right, good. I got it. I was trying to figure it out. I thought it was on my end.
Yeah, you couldn't hear me because I didn't want you to hear me because I was on
Yeah,
a call with someone about stuff we'll discuss tomorrow when I come to talk about my department. So I'm
very
sorry
good,
about
very
that.
good. Nope.
So I think I let everybody in. Is there anybody waiting? Looks like there are 2 people waiting. Let's let them in. Then I'll tell you who I am. Say sorry about that. Yeah, that's why I kept doing this. Like, no, you can't hear me. You're not supposed to hear me. I muted myself because, as you will learn, until you've completed the training, you can't hear clients' information.
I just assumed I was doing something wrong, so
Well,
it's
sounds
fine.
like me. Yeah, that's the kind of thing
Yes.
I touched something I shouldn't have been touching. That's what's happening.
I finally figured out my camera, but so we're good. Sorry, thank you.
No problem. No problem. Until you start throwing rocks, you ain't got nothing to apologize for. Now, if any of you start throwing rocks, it's gonna be another conversation. So I think we have 9 people. Let's see where I can put you so I can see you. Let me get rid of this. I'll check again. So hold on one second. I'll mute you again. I wanted to say off to my Dot, because if you say her name out loud and you guys have one, it'll wake up. So hello, 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 hello. I think we've got everybody. Just let me know. Are there 9 people in the training? Okay, the nod is yes. Okay, so we have all 9. So I know your syllabus says, and the first slide says Jen Lockhart, who is no longer the Director of Client Services. She's our Executive Director. She's taking care of a couple fires in the program that have to be put out. So you have me today. So this will be a prep for tomorrow because you have me also tomorrow. Who am I? I am Tommy Wilkins. I am the Victim Response Program Manager, so you'll have me tomorrow. As you will learn, I'm a little on the goofier side, but my theory of this is you gotta laugh to keep from crying. You're probably wondering, why is Law and Order, and Jane Austen, and Wawa up there? Those are all the things that make up who I am. I have seen every episode of Law and Order in all its forms except there's a Korean Law and Order that I've yet to see. There's an English Law and Order in England, and there's one in Korea. I'm gonna find it. So I've seen every last episode known to mankind. I've got problems. I've got issues. What can I say? My favorite playwright is August Wilson. I will see an August Wilson play. I will go anywhere to see August Wilson. If you don't know who he is, Google him. The man was awesome. So who am I? Where I come from? Just so you can have some information about me. Let me see if I can move you guys around. There, yeah. I'm gonna move you around. You don't like that. I don't like that either. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out where to put your little heads. Okay. A little bit about me. I have been doing, I guess I need to own up to it. I've been doing domestic violence work for the last 40 years. Yes, 40 years. I have worked in almost every DV program in this end of the state and only left because they ran out of money. So not because I was doing something I had no business doing. So I was at Laurel House in Montgomery County for 18 years. Was at Lutheran Settlement House. Worked part-time and still work part-time at Women Against Abuse on the Hotline. I worked on a violence against women grant for Cabrini University before it became defunct. I've worked hotline, I've worked shelter, community ed, going to high schools, colleges, set up the training program for Laurel House, their original training program for volunteers, recruiting volunteers, going to high schools, colleges, doing dating and domestic violence training. I am suited for this because I don't know how to shut up. I run my mouth extensively. What I'm doing right now for a woman's place is I am manager supervisor of our victim response program, which is in reality, in a more basic phrase, we do the legal accompaniment. So applying for PFAs, criminal cases, accompanying people to criminal cases, working with people in conjunction with the police department. My goal is to also do more trainings with the police departments, sheriff's departments, anywhere I can get in to do trainings, to give them the basic information. My big goal is to train the judges in Bucks County. That's a big one. That's my white whale, but I'm working on it. So to get in with the judges and do a training with them or a coffee clutch or something to give them some information. But we will talk about that more tomorrow when you have me tomorrow morning. Today, I'm going to give you confidentiality. Any questions? You can use the chat, but know that I'm not, like, I'm just reading the chat now from We Can't Hear You. So feel free to interrupt me and go, Tommy, I got a question. Also, if I'm talking too fast, feel free to go. I'm a fast talker. I come from a long line of fast talkers. So I will try to slow myself down. And know that if you're using facial expressions to note your disagreement, agreement, your wonderfulness, I can't see everybody. So I can only see 8 of you. Yeah, no, 6 of you. And I keep moving you around. So speak up, feel free, ask questions. The only wrong question is the sky blue? And that might not even be wrong because it might be gray right now. So, before we start, as a little icebreaker, how about that earthquake? Did any of you feel the earthquake? Did you even know there was an earthquake?
Oh,
You have
yeah.
to
Know about it. My dad texted me from North Carolina worried. It was nothing for here.
Oh, see, no, I'm in Philly. I'm the last street in West Philly. My house shook. I had a
Yeah,
bag
All
of
the
potato
picture,
chips.
all the pictures on the wall show. I
Yeah,
thought a tree fell down or something. Yeah, it took a while to understand.
yeah. I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, is this it? Is it over? Is this the end? Like,
Only when frogs start falling out of the sky, then we
well,
know it's
okay,
really
yeah. So yeah, I was like, okay, what's happening? And then it stopped, and I'm like, I didn't get up, I didn't run around. I just sat there. Like, my theory in life is, if it's going to end because a building falls on me, I want to be in one spot. I want all my body parts in one space. I was in a fire once in the Holland Tunnel. People with me in the car like, we should get out and run. And the woman who wanted to run, like, you just got 2 brand new knees. You're not running nowhere. I fell asleep in the car. I'm like, if I'm gonna die in the Holland Tunnel, I want my arms, legs, and everything just one little spot. I don't want you to have to go looking for my fingers over here, just one spot. So that just gives you a little tint of my wackiness. But so so for our icebreaker, we all made it through. We didn't lose any stuff. It was frightening. Yes, it was frightening for family members. I will say that because I did have people reach out for me. Um, what was the furthest reach out? My friend in London reached out. It's like, I hear you people in Philadelphia aren't acting right again. Like, no, we're not, but that's okay. Okay, so what you have up are some of the things we're gonna try to give you out of this. Jen is gonna do the second part, shelter, or she may have to reschedule because some things are going down. But she'll do the second part with shelter. I'm doing this first part. I'm not gonna read all the slides to you because you should be able to do that. If you can't do that, like, dyslexic or whatever, I'm dyslexic. So when I say maybe you can't read it, it's because I understand it. I read slow. So hey, I got that there. I've lost 2 of you, so now I only have 4 up here. So why confidentiality? Oh, by the way, this is an interactive presentation for me. So that means you got to unmute yourself and you have to answer questions. And I don't like silence, but I have no problem sitting in silence. So someone's gonna have to answer, or I can just, volunteer people. Why is confidentiality in this? Why do you think it's important? That was a question.
I guess on top of everybody wanting their secrets and their personal stuff to not get around, there's also the safety issue that you don't want an abuser necessarily to know that they're looking for help.
Yeah. And that's it. And it's I don't want, first and foremost, I want the abuser to know. Second, and almost equal to that, is this is my stuff. This is what I've gone through. This is the trauma that I experienced. The only one who has the right to it is me. Also, for me, you come to me and you're talking to me, and if you're going to be a volunteer on court on Wednesdays, or pathology volunteer helping people fill out PFAs, or in the thrift shop, or in the shelter, if I'm sitting down with you and I'm telling you what I've been through, I don't want to be in a bathroom stall and hear you by the bathroom going, yeah, Tom, because she did this and this. Because now, one, it's a stab to the heart. My confidence is lower, and I don't trust you, and I don't trust anybody else. And when it comes time for me to have to tell this in court or wherever, am I going to tell it? Because now this woman, this man who I talked to said they weren't going to tell anybody, or I thought they would tell. Now they in the bathroom talking about it. Like my most heinous stuff I've been through, I'm not going to share it with anybody. So one of the things that we do is say to people, we're not going to tell anybody unless we give you your permission. And it's all about trust. We need to build trust with people who may not have, their ability to trust has been shattered. It's been shattered by someone. Thing I say to my clients is, it's been shattered by someone who who was supposed, all they did was love and trust this person and love and care for this person. And this person used that against them. So my ability to trust is going to be kind of iffy. Also, I'm trying to tell you stuff that I haven't told anybody in some cases, and now you're sharing it with people. Sometimes it has to be shared, but I'm going to tell you ahead of time. I mean, we'll get into reporting child abuse. I'm going to tell you, I may have to share this with someone. I'm going to have to get a release of information from you so that I can share this. Along with a big trust means we have to do it. The thing we also have to look at is, for us, confidentiality in the domestic violence program is very important. And I will be honest, there are other agencies we work with who don't get it. There are collateral agencies that we work with. And I understand where they're coming from, and they need to understand where we're coming from. It's attack of the cats. It's understand. I have the attention span of a dead flea, so I'm going to mention stuff. Don't feel bad. I just have the attention span of a dead flea. Who don't understand our confidentiality, who will say to us, wait a minute, that's our client. Why can't you tell us? I'm like, they didn't tell me I could tell you. I don't know what you know, what I can't tell you. I'm big on giving examples. So I'll give you my example. When I worked at another agency, of the police officer I knew him socially and professionally. And he called when I was working in this shelter. He said, we got this woman, can we bring her in? I'm like, well, I got to talk. And he's like, I know, you got to talk to her first, do an intake. We give her the phone, you talk to her, I'll leave the room, do the intake. Did the intake. He brought her to the shelter. He knew what the shelter was because he'd been here before donating stuff. Brought her to the shelter, let her knock on the door for her, ran back to the car because he knew I wasn't opening the door. He was standing there. She came in, we got her settled. 2 days later, I'm working again. We'll say his name was Bob. Bob calls. Bob needed to get information to her and from her because there was a criminal case and he wanted to arrange picking her up. Because he was a good guy. And he wanted to he wanted to make sure she got there. He wanted to be less trauma. That was before we had advocates in the courtroom. So he called to say, I need to talk to her to tell her that I'm going to pick her up this day. And I was like, oh, hey, how you doing? And he said, we'll call her Jane. I need to let Jane know that I'm going to pick her up tomorrow at 8 a.m. and she could meet me at the meeting place. Like we'd go to a certain place where women can meet, men and women can meet their rides or whatever. And I was like, who? He's like, Jane. I cannot confirm or deny if there is a Jane Smith here. And he's like, have you lost your mind? What kind of crack are you smoking? I'm like, I'm not smoking crack. I cannot confirm or deny. He's like, I saw you. I talked to you. I looked you in your silly face 2 nights ago when you opened the door and you let her in. I know you know her. I know you know me. I'm like, I cannot confirm or deny if there is a Jane Smith here. And he went on for a good 5 minutes. Why can't you? You know me, you know her, I know I'm a police department. Like, I don't know who you are. I know nothing about you. I'm sorry. I cannot confirm or deny. I don't know if that woman's here. I don't know who's here. And then he went on to okay, then he started playing the game. Okay, so can you go ask that person here? I cannot confirm or deny. And in the background later on, at the end of the conversation, I heard his wife yell, it's a domestic violence program, stupid. Why? She don't know who she's talking to. Why would she tell you that? And he was like, oh, yeah. I'm like, I still cannot confirm or deny. So police departments sometimes don't understand. I think they now started to understand, but there are other programs who are like that. That example, they know, you saw them in court, they saw you in court, but we still can't share anything because it's not our stuff to share. It's not our information to share. It's not our trauma to share. So, he finally got it, after his wife yelled at him. And I think he said she threw a spoon at his head. It's confidentiality, is total confidentiality. We're not sharing any information without a release of information. I could have talked to this person on a Tuesday. Had the release of information on the 15th of the month spoke to them, it is now the 16th of the month. I can no longer share this information. And I take it confidentiality very seriously. So I'm not, so you might say that's a day, that's 24 hours. I'm going to take that seriously. I'm not, this is a person's information. And releases are only good for 30 days. So you have to get a new one.
Tommy,
Yes.
I have a question. Do you find that if clients have outside like children and youth or probation that they're pressured in on their end to sign releases to talk with you? I don't know.
So I've worked a number of places. So I used to work at Montgomery County Office of Children and Youth Services.
Yeah.
I think they're a little better than they used to be, because I will be honest, when I worked in Child Protective Services,
Mhm.
I got praised for doing something that I later learned was unethical
Oh.
and just messed up on several levels. I would have people sign releases of information that were a year long. You never sign a release of more than a month. And none in your life happening that I need to know from a year from now. So maybe it wasn't pressuring. And I have been told I didn't know any better. No one told me not to do that. I got praised for doing it. Now the system has changed. They're probably only doing 1 month. I hope you can't hear that. That's someone walking by my front. I think the systems have changed. So Child Protective Services, and as I say, it may have changed. There's going to be one that's popped up and still doing that unethical stuff. But I think the systems have changed. If for no other reason, to be brutally honest, Child Protective Service agencies have lost their license. It's only in the last, say, 15 years that Philadelphia had the right to govern themselves.
Mm.
The Philadelphia, it's DHS. They lost their license like 2 and 3 years in a row, and the government ran them. The state of Pennsylvania ran them. So I think if for no other reasons, agencies aren't pressuring because they don't want to lose their license, they don't want to lose grants. Now, is there some strange worker out there who doesn't know any better? Possibly. Are they going to get their hand held to them, their head handed to them if it's found out? Yes. So, also to continue on that whole issue, there was for the longest time, especially with Child Protective Services and the Welfare Department, this theory that, and I won't say fathers, I'll say mothers or fathers. So whoever the abuser was, that did not affect their ability to be a good parent. I'm sorry, I totally disagree. And the DV programs and Child Protective Service agencies and welfare programs fought for years over that, because they would say, well, hey, yes, he put her in the hospital, she put him in the hospital, but their kids shouldn't be taken away. Uh, 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 So I think we finally settled that argument, but that kind of leans into your like, would they pressure? They may not pressure, but it may be, well, if you don't, we're going to have to give the kids to your abuser. So that might make me sign something because I don't want my kids to go to.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Yeah. So the releases, you say they last up to 30 days. Can a client specify a shorter amount of time if they want?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You can say it's up because it's your life. It's your business, for lack of a better phrase. So you can say, yeah, I'm not signing this for 30 days. You can have it for a week. People tend to give us 30 days because it's something they need us to do. And also, it could be annoying having to keep signing these things. So people would be like, okay, I'm just going to sign this because I'm tired of signing stuff. But they can ask for whatever they want, and we will adhere to it. I don't know what I did to y'all. Hold on a second, because now I can only see 2 people. There you go. There's everybody. Well, not everybody. I'm still missing. Okay, so what confidentiality? So you can look up the statute, because we are governed by the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and there are federal and state laws that we're governed by. And this is one of them about confidentiality. I just can't find, oh, I'll put y'all down here so I can see it. I'll give you a second to read. Now, here's the kicker about this. This protects my conversation with a client. So we'll keep using Jane or John Doe. And I'm sorry, let me stop for a second, especially for the men in the group. My biggest soapbox and horse that I ride is the recognizing of male victims. Domestic violence is no longer a women's only issue. Granted, the majority of victims are female, and the last survey we did, 20% of victims, and I might be off on that, I don't know, just statistics, were men. There are male victims out there, and if they don't fall, just like female victims don't fall, can be of anything, so can male victims. I have had male clients. I used to counsel male victims. So, and I will try not to go on my tangent about male victims because they aren't always taken serious. So they are out there. So I will adjust he or she, because domestic violence does not care who you are. Doesn't care. And I'm gonna go off on this and bring back in. So sorry, I should have started with this. Domestic violence doesn't care who you are, how much money you make, where you live. You're Black, white, Russian, Asian, native, you from Switzerland or wherever. It doesn't matter. It's the one of the couple of things that are across the planet. It doesn't care. The only thing that domestic violence does truly and clearly is it tries to hide very well. And it will convince its victim that they are wrong and it is their fault, along with sexual assault and a few other things. But there are male victims out there. I've had several clients, male victims. I've had a number of male victims as clients. So I will stop now because I could go on for days about male victims. Try to behave myself.
Well, thank you. I don't care. I don't care either.
Yeah.
Man or woman. So I appreciate that.
And okay, one more last tangent about male victims. Female abusers can be a little bit more sadistic and sly. And I've seen them where the court staff come in the room and now they're all sweet and innocent. The court staff leave and now they're all evil and shooting eyeballs. But the people are going to believe her. Okay, I'm going to stop. Maybe I'll save that for tomorrow. So this is our confidentiality. So we have to, if nothing else, out of respect for our clients, for the people we serve, out of just pure respect of what they've been through. I need to figure out how to maneuver you guys. Oh, and I know this is where I was going before I went off my tangent. Forgive me in tangents. At one time, it still holds that under the Violence Against Women's Act, which needs to be renamed, once you complete this training, get your certificate, do your practicum, theoretically, you cannot be subpoenaed. Now, for you guys, it's not an issue because if it showed up that somebody wanted to subpoena you, so don't get scared and not volunteer for the program I'm going to beg you to volunteer from, you're not going to get subpoenaed. And if you are, we'll just squash it. We have an attorney, we have several attorneys. Jen will go in your place, I'll go in your place. And what also happens is we're not allowed to be subpoenaed because we're covered against the Violence Against Women's Act. So anything that I say, a client said to me, I'm not supposed to repeat. Now, why do I bring it up? Because some lawyers can be vindictive or not know what they're doing and will subpoena folks because either they know they can't subpoena you, but can't subpoena me. So it's more staff. It's rarely, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Where am I? I'm trying to adjust y'all. Okay, there you are. Some lawyers, and I'm not slamming lawyers because, hey, they got to do what they got to do. They're getting paid. But some lawyers, either because they don't know or because they're being vindictive, will subpoena us knowing that they can't or not knowing they can't. And we still have to show up. We just have to show up and say, hey, we can't say anything. Now, I say this with understanding and supporting the lawyers who do this because I have done it myself. So back when I was doing stuff I had no business doing that was unethical, I would subpoena back in the day, especially most of the stuff was Child Protective Services. So when I moved to DV, I kind of cleaned up my act. But a lot of it's on Child Protective Services. So my example would be for this one, I had a child abuse case. CHOP would not give me medical records. They kept playing with me. And child abuse has its own set of laws that are like concrete. Man kept playing with me. Wasn't going to give me the records. I got to dance the hokey pokey and run around the bush. He said he needed a subpoena. So I'm going to get him a subpoena. He said he didn't get the first subpoena. Okay, I'm do a subpoena, get it, and I'm going to have our transportation staff delivered to him. And because I can be vindictive, but now I only say my vindictive behavior for abusers, I put his name on the subpoena. Now, why do you need to know that? Subpoena for medical records just has the medical records and the department hospital, not the head of medical records. Because if the head of medical records' name is on the subpoena, guess who has to show up with the medical records? They can't send them by a courier. They've gotten to change it a little bit now. But that was really just a vindictive act. Why am I bringing that up? Sometimes it'll be done as a vindictive act, knowing you can't get anything from me, but I'm going to call you in, or I didn't know any better. But we're not, so to end all that, we can't say anything. We could subpoena me to court, I'll show up, I have no problem. I like being in the courtroom. I can't say anything. Also under that, we should not be identified. You should not be identified. So one of the things that happen under confidentiality issues that is a little, I don't know what is it, it's a tick, a tweak, or whatever. We have 7 volunteers in the courtroom on Wednesday, which I'll share tomorrow when I'm speaking on my program. We have 7 volunteers who come on Wednesdays to help clients. So court accompaniment, so going into the courtroom for the PFA hearings to assist them and be there, hold their hands, whatever, explain what's happening. And a lot of times the judges, some of them are awesome. They're all awesome. There are only a couple who are like, most of them are really awesome. And a lot of them will come in, and before the hearing starts, before the call of the list, will ask the lawyers to stand who have volunteered their time, which is awesome. They're doing this just because, like, hey, they got a good heart and they want to help people. I like, yes. And thank them for volunteering their time. The volunteers from a woman's place, like, well, you don't ever thank us. And I've had to say, and I've recently said to them, yeah, but they don't want to thank you. I mean, they want to thank you, but they don't want you to stand up so everybody in the room can see, oh, this is the advocate. Okay, now I know who to go yell at. So it's not because they don't appreciate you. They're respecting the confidentiality. That they can say, we want to thank the volunteers from a woman's place for being here. So, that's part of the confidentiality. Any questions as I prattle on? So in your binder, and do read your binder. Leaf through your binder. I know it's a lot, but do read it. Especially around confidentiality, around everything. Read it all. Oh, I have to check the clock because I do talk a lot.
Tommy, I don't have a question, but I'm a lawyer, and you can say whatever you want because I totally agree 100%. Just give me a heads up.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, you're doing your job if you subpoena me just because, like, hey, I want to get out of her. She might say something she don't know she ain't supposed to be saying. It's gonna help me. So hey, yeah. So our absolute privilege. Our records, we keep records, but, and I don't know if it's the next slide, we are very particular about what we keep in records. So what we keep is I want to see if that's the next slide. Okay, no, it's not. So I'll jump ahead and give you this. We're very particular about what we keep in records. We're not going to keep, our notes are simple and, modern technology is wonderful. So back in the day, 1,000 years ago, when the dinosaurs roamed the universe and I first started out, we had case notes we would write by hand and put in a folder. Now it's all computerized and you can type stuff, but you keep it simple and brief. Why is it simple and brief? Because the example I always give, I'm talking to a client and they're saying how I had a dream last night. I hit my wife upside the head with a frying pan. And we talk about that. And what did that mean? And how do you feel about that? And do you have a safety plan? And well, how does that tie into what's been going on in you? If I write down in my notes, John said he dreamt about hitting his wife in the head with a frying pan. Even if I have to use less words because there's not enough room, I said, John hit wife in head with frying pan, which I shouldn't even write it that way. If the case file is subpoenaed or someone gets a hold of it on the wrong side, well, isn't it true that you weren't really that scared of her because you had a plan? You were going to hit her in the head with a frying pan. So things that didn't mean that We don't want to put in notes. We don't want to put poems to talk about anything. We don't want poems. We don't want pictures. We want to be very to the point in the stuff we write down. Because if it does, there may be laws and guidelines for everything, but there's always a freaking nature where something happens and someone gets it. And we don't want anything a person said in an attempt to heal and to empower themselves used against them. Let me move this up so I can see some faces. Okay. I like how you smiled as soon as I went over, Sarah. Your smile popped up as soon as I moved pages. Okay, so let me give you another slide. Child abuse. We are mandated reporters. State of Pennsylvania, we are mandated reporters. We have to report anything that is said to us that appears to be child abuse. We don't have to evaluate it, investigate it. We have to report it. Reporting child abuse now is more streamlined. We will say to the client, our intake coordinator who does the second line of contact with the victim, and the victim may say what's happening, and her abuser locked the kids in the basement in the process of saying what happened. In the process of her intake with them, she's going to say, well, there's no one in that position now, so he or she may say, I'm going to have to report this to Child Protective Services. Two things may come of that. The client may, those three things. The client might be happy, like, good, someone's reporting it. They don't care, or they're scared to death. You're going to report it. Because if you report it to Child Protective Services, the Child Line, once they get it, has to have someone out in that house in 24 hours from the initial report. So if I'm planning on leaving, if I'm scared this person is going to try to kill me, or there's going to be another episode for me and the children, I might not want that to happen, but that has to happen. I have to report it. So we're going to tell them we're going to report it. And if the next part of the conversation needs to be, okay, let's come up with a safety plan. Let's get you out now. Who can you stay with? Can we make this phone call? You know, can you call somebody? Can we get you in the shelter? Let's try the shelters in the area to get you in. Let's see what we can do. But we're going to tell them we're going to make that report. And we need to make that report because it's a child. And as someone who used to do Child Protective Services, I left for just this reason. Children can't speak up for themselves. Children can't protect themselves. Adults can barely do it. That's the reason we're here. But a child has no recourse other than that's reporting it and it being investigated. So we have to report it. We're mandated reporters. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If as a volunteer someone says something to you and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. Tommy did confidentiality. He started talking about, there's always going to be a staff person. So you're never ever going to really be alone. And if for some reason you are, there's email, there's phones, you can call and go, Tommy, this person just said something to me. What are we supposed to do? And we'll help you through it. It's not the worst thing that can happen because it's just something that we have to do. And if you're ever caught, you just go, hey, I don't know what to do about this. My view of working with victims, survivors, is honesty is the best. You asked me, I don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't know, but let's find out together. Or let me find out and get back to you. And my standard line, because I had a client say to me the other day, I know, Tommy, you're going to call me Tuesday. And if I don't hear from you Tuesday, call me Wednesday morning to make sure you're still thinking about what I need to do. I'm going to find out. I'm going to get back to you. Or let's find out together. Because that in of itself is empowering. Like you go Google, I go Google. Let's get back together and see if we done Googled and found out. So I'm all about the honesty. So the honesty about child abuse reporting. I know I have to report this. I don't necessarily know how this needs to be done. Let me find out for you how this is going to work out. And I will get back to you before anything is done to the best of my ability or have a staff person. So it's easy. If you lead on honesty, I don't know. I do know this is what I got to do. That people tend to respect it instead of faking it. I haven't had a client be upset because I was honest and said I didn't know anything. I've had a client say to me, I can't with you, Miss Tommy. I just can't with you. I'm like, okay, you can't with me, but let's go see what we need to find out. So people respect it. Mandated reporters, suspected child abuse has to be reported, as I've been saying. And again, they said something. You don't have to evaluate it. You don't have to know if it's true. You don't have to look up the law and see if it's in the law of what child abuse is. They said something, it don't sound right. You feel free to report it, because the people whose job it is to evaluate it is each county's child protective service agencies, and they all have either DHS, Office of Children and Youth, Office of Children and Family. They're all the same. They're all governed by the state. Each county has one. It goes up. Your report goes to Harrisburg. Harrisburg then sends it out to whatever county it happened in. It's their job to figure out if something did or didn't happen. It is not always the end of the world. A lot of child protective agencies have the reputation of being baby snatchers. Can't tell you the number of times I've been called baby snatchers. I'm still good. There's this old woman I see from time to time that her son calls me a baby snatcher, but he's just joking. They're not necessarily going to take someone's children. Now, if they need to take them, they're going to take them, and they can take them and find a family member to take them for them to go live with. But sometimes it's just let's find out what happened. What's going on. When it involves domestic violence and child abuse, it gets sticky because it goes back to, I think it was Sarah's question about will they be coerced, for the better word, into signing a release. There are still some agencies who, kind of rightfully so, may take custody of children and say to mom, I know that the abuser, dad or mom, the abuser did it, but you at this point in time are not in a place where you can provide these children with a safe environment. So we're going to take custody. You find a family member you have, we can put them in foster care. We do kinship care or put them in foster care until you can get yourself into a place where you can provide them with a safe environment. So this may require them getting a protection from abuse order. The only thing, I understand that, I've done that, I understand it. My only issue with it, with victims of domestic violence and survivors of domestic violence, they may be being forced to make a move they are not ready to make, or they have not even figured out they need to make. Because domestic violence is about, I realize right now that this person may kill me, hurt me, or I just don't like how they're treating me. It is painful emotionally, psychologically, and physically, and I'm scared, and my kids are scared, and I need to leave. Or more times, not likely, I believe I deserve this. I'm not ready to leave. I don't want to leave this person because it's my fault. Because they're right. I'm dumb. I'm stupid. I don't know how to do anything. So I don't want to leave. So you're forcing me to leave, and all I'm going to do is go back. The statistic that I stand on, I don't quote many of them, is that a victim, and it's a lesser time for a male victim, but for a female victim, will leave 7 times before they leave permanently. My add-on, this is Tommy's add-on, are they going to live 7 times to leave? But with Child Protective Services saying, we're going to take the kids and you can't get them back until you leave and get a protection from abuse order. Are they at a place where they realize, yes, I need to do this? Or are they still in that web of, it's my fault? I deserve it. And it's all my fault. So I'm going to do what these people say, get my kid back, and then I'm going to go back. That's more dangerous. Because, as just a side note for that, I've left and gone back. The abuser's mind is now saying, whatever I was doing before, evidently I wasn't doing enough of it. So I need to up the level of abuse because you thought you could leave and now you're back. Any questions about mandated reporters? And Maddie, you're mute if you're talking. You're muted. Were you talking, Maddie?
I'm so sorry. I was talking to my daughter. She just came back from school.
Okay, no problem. She's probably like, why are you talking to me but not looking at me? So no problem.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
I tried to pretend as if I was paying attention. Okay. But you saw that. All right, sorry.
No problem. Don't worry about it. Like I said, I have the attention span of a dead flea. So the slightest things gain my attention because Michael's now scratching his eye. So it doesn't take much to draw my attention. I can just multitask in what I'm doing. So we're still mandated reporters. Now, here's the big thing about this. So you'll read the screen and I'll keep running my mouth. We can report to them, but we're not going to tell them anything other than the report. If they call us back, we need to get a release. They're also not going to tell us anything. They're not going to tell us anything, even if we call them. It's the same thing as if they called us, can't confirm or deny. We call them and cannot confirm or deny. That's how I got back into doing DV. I was working Child Protective Services, and Laurel House at the time kept calling Child Protective Services because they would report things and they wanted to know the status. And the caseworkers at Office of Children and Youth in Montgomery County were getting pissed. Like, why these people keep calling us? We're not going to tell them, no, they need to stop. Leave us alone. And I am a fixer. I can't help myself. And I kept hearing this, and I'm like, okay, I had a friend who worked at Laurel House. I called her and went, hey, what's going on? I think she called me one day to go, can you tell me about a client? And I'm like, no, I can't tell you about a client. But you want me to tell you what I can tell you? You want to have a training? So I volunteered to go and train the staff at Laurel House. They sent me with one of the supervisors who was like, okay, I can stay for the first like 20 minutes and I have to leave, you have to finish. I'm like, fine. Another thing about me, I have very low tolerance for the party line. I like give people brass tacks reality, what's gonna happen. Party line is not bad. I understand why it exists, but I can't. It's probably why they sent her with me. So she was there explaining like, yeah, Child Protective Service, we're happy, shiny people, and this is what we do. She left and I went, so do you want to know the real deal? Because I can tell you the real deal. Or I can give you happy, shiny people, whatever you want. They're like, we want the real deal. We're not going to tell you anything. You can call us all you want. All you're doing is pissing us off. We can't tell you anything, just like you can't tell anybody anything. So stop calling us. We're not going to tell you anything, which they appreciated. I explained the system to them and explained like, hey, don't get pissed at us because we can't tell you anything just because you get mad when people call you and you can't tell them anything. And then they offered me a job. But it's the same thing. So we're not, they can't tell us anything and we can't tell them anything. They have federal laws. Can I change the screen? What are we doing for time? I do want to give you a break because listening to me prattle on is a bit much. I'm letting you read as I move around. Okay, so let me back up. I'm just going to do these two. Number 3. Are you reporting that? This is a question to you, and this is an easy one. Molly, are you reporting that? Because I can see your names. You got to unmute yourself. Use words.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would report that.
Okay. 4, are we reporting that? I can't do head nods because I can't see everybody's face, even though, Sarah, I did see your head at that time, but I need you to vocalize. Are we reporting that?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So these are easy ones. But here's the thing. You don't have to guess. If it sounds like any example will be something you would report, but you're always going to report. If it's questionable, you're reporting. You're going to a staff person and you're reporting. And it's an online reporting. If you don't feel like doing with technology, you can still call Childline and report. So, know what's reportable? I say report anything. If you think it's funny, if you don't know, you can run it by a staff person. If you're reporting something that turns out to be nothing, then the investigation will be nothing. The general investigation will be nothing. So what happens with child abuse calls, you call in or report it to Harrisburg Child Line. If it doesn't meet the requirement for an investigation, they will not make an investigation. They will call the local office and say, here's a general report. The difference between an investigation and a general report, an investigation has the child, the parents have to be contacted within 24 hours of the report being made. They have to be met in person. Letters have to be sent out and the local police department has to be notified. A general report, they have maybe 48 hours. The police don't have to be notified. They get to do the investigation. Not even, it's not, and that word investigation is loosely used. They get to do a report and find out, and then decide if it needs to be reported to Harrisburg and become a child line report, or can it just be a general, they close it or they move it on for continuing services. So if there's any concern about, again, I keep saying this about reporting, you can always ask a staff person or just make the report and let Harrisburg fill it out. Your local agency is Child Protective Services in Bucks County. I forget what they call themselves. They all call themselves some variation of Child Protective Services, Family Protective Services, some variation of that. They all exist. You can always just Google them. If you're calling Harrisburg, Harrisburg knows who they're sending it to. So it's not a problem. And this is all, and everything we do is on behalf of the survivor and their children and making them be safe or providing them with safety. Release of information. We'll keep talking about that. You got to get a release of information. So if we're going to talk to Montgomery County, Bucks County, Philadelphia County, I need a release. And we constantly I monitor one of our faxes because now everything is digital, so it comes to the laptop. And I'm forever getting requests from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Bucks County, Montgomery County, mostly Bucks County, asking for information on clients. I just send off our plain little letter that I've even put my name already on it. We cannot confirm or deny this person's here. If you would like any further information, please get a release of information from that person. And know that we have to get a release if that person exists in our system, a release from that. So we can't just get a release from the agency. So if Michael has the agency for the savior of all cats known to mankind, he has to write a release to give to us, and then I have to get a release from my cat saying it's okay to talk to that person. So we need two releases. I use Michael because I saw his cat in the background. So we still have to get our own release. So they can give us one, which is good. That starts the ball bowling, but we still have to get a release of information from our client. We're discussing the pros and cons. We're going to discuss who we're doing this release for, what's it about, who's it coming from. Is it coming from Child Protective Services? Is it coming from welfare? Is it coming from VCAP? And VCAP is the Victim Compensation Fund, which we want to release. They want us to release information to victim compensation because they put in money to get the door replaced or their lost wages. So they're going to want that. But we're discussing who's it's coming from and what it's going to be used for and the limitation of time. Going back to that question, I'm assigning this release, Sarah, but I'm only going to sign it for a week. So I'm only going to sign it for a second. And if you need, and to go back, I'm sorry. So I may say I only want it for a week. It may be for something that I know is the process of it happening is going to take maybe 2 months. So having that conversation, like, yes, you only want to do it for a week. I'll respect that. We'll do it for a week. But know that then you're going to have to come back every week because it's something that's going to take longer than a week to get done. So you may have to sign another one. People may be fine with that, but you're letting them know. You're discussing the ins and outs, the pros and cons. And the other thing that I did when I said I got praise for my release of information, I think, Michael, you're not the only lawyer here. I think there's another one.
Me, I'm a lawyer.
Okay, so neither of you come for me.
Yeah, I'm not going to out any of them, but there probably are more than one on the call.
Well, I don't want you to out me because along with me doing those year-long releases, they were blank. You don't ever sign a blank release. Yeah, Melissa, I see your name there. So don't come for me.
You're good. I'm good.
I don't do that anymore. That was like hundreds of years ago. But I say to clients, now you don't sign nothing that don't have an end date and doesn't have who it's for. Because it can be used for anything. I mean, I never use it for anything, but it's unethical. You can't be doing that. That's not cool. So who is it for? I don't even put a specific person sometimes. What are we looking at? I'm going to give you a break in a second. Again, this is all about trust. Just because we are humans working with people who are in need, we need to build their trust. We need to be trustworthy. And breaking confidentiality is breaking their trust. It's not cool, for lack of a better phrase. Because this is people's, it's not just their information, but it's their trauma. It is stuff they may have told you, they may have told the police, they may have told their attorney from legal aid, but they didn't tell their mother. They may have not told their children. They've only told you, and you can't share it. Every story I tell about clients, I have gone to a client first who has left whatever program, and I've run into them, and I'm like, I do presentations. Can I share your story? I've had several said, no, don't share my story. Cool, I will never cross these lips. I've had some who were like, yeah, you want pictures? I'm like, no, I don't want pictures. I can just tell them your story. But so the stories I tell are from people who know I tell their stories. And because you don't want people to hear about this at a later date. You'd also just, for me, it's like, I know I'm saying it and they don't have their permission. That just like makes me feel like messy. I mean, I still have guilt about those release of information. So I keep talking about the ones I did. I shouldn't, because I still feel guilty. I feel dirty that I did it, but I didn't know any better. And the purpose of this is so you know better.
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Within a women's place, like say as a counselor, confidentiality, do we need to obtain releases like to talk to someone in legal or to talk to, a supervisor, something like that? Just I want to get clear on within the agency.
The counseling department, I jokingly say, I don't even know what they do up there. We send them a client, that's the end of it. If there's no release, I only know what clients tell me about their counseling. Someone talked to me the other day and said, yeah, I was talking to so-and-so, she's my counselor. They're like, you know her. I'm like, honestly, I've only seen her once on Zoom, and she's not going to talk to me about you. She'll talk to me about, we're happy hour, but she's not going to. They're like, but you don't know. No, I don't know. I don't want to know unless you want me to know. And she's not going to tell me anything. Or he's not going to tell you because they have a couple of male counselors. So yeah, within departments, we're not sharing anything without a release. So the shelter can refer. The shelter has enough of their own stuff to do that they're not even asking my department what we're doing. But counseling periodically, we're like, but what's happening? And the housing program also will not tell us anything without a release.
Yeah, thanks.
Then if you, like as a counselor, if you like find the need to consult with your department, then would that be okay?
After I get a release of information
From the client?
from the client.
The client, okay.
So if I want to talk to the counseling program about something, I need to get a release from that client to talk to the counseling program and vice versa.
Yeah. Okay.
And for housing, they can do a referral.
Yeah.
So if counseling has someone who they know who said to them, I want to get a PFA, I need help, they can do the referral because the referral is just first name, last name, and phone number and state phone number.
Mm-hmm.
As I do people who I talk to who like, I don't know if I want a PFA, to like counseling, I could send a referral over to counseling and say, this person wants counseling. Here's their name and phone number, and then take it from there.
Okay.
And the same for housing. Housing will reach out to me for PFA's assistance. But no more information than that. And that's at the request. Survivors information. So you got this. I also want to mention for confidentiality. And this is partially a sales pitch for my program. Our volunteers work on Wednesdays in the court system doing PFA accompaniment. And then I have volunteers right now twice a week, but I want someone every day of the week. And it's only from like about 10 to 1, maybe 2. to sit outside the pathonetary's office and help people fill out the applications for a PFA. Not deep, it's not heavy. You don't need to know any deep legalese. You just need to be a voice to help them fill it out. And my train of thought just flew out my head. I'm so sorry. Oh, okay, I know I was going with that. Sorry, it just flew out my head. Confidentiality even extends to that. So, pathonetary volunteers. It's the pathonetary. For those who don't know, the pathonetary's office. I just after some 100 years, I just figured out how to say pathonetary. The pathonetary's office, and correct me those who know better, handle PFAs, custody. I think they do wills and other stuff that we don't care about. But the pathonetary's office is where they do the processing of the PFA requests and contempt requests and custody. We only do PFAs and contempt of PFAs. Confidentiality with that. Our volunteer, we have one volunteer and one staff person, Tuesday and Thursday, one on each day. She will meet with someone, do an intake, write down their information. If she's just doing the petition for the PFA, then it's just an intake. She's doing the basic information. If she goes with them, accompanies them to the ex parte hearing, which is the hearing to get temporary PFA, there's another little form she does for how much time she spent with them. Those two pieces of paper are now going into a locked envelope. So there's a bag at the pathonetary's office where we keep all our stuff for our volunteers to use. Any paperwork they do in documentation will go in the locked envelope with a combination on it and go back into the bag we have, one of those rolly bags, goes back in the rolly bag in the drawer and is closed. So if you're thinking, well, someone will just take the bag or take the envelope, you're not getting in the pathonetary's office. It's in the back room of the pathonetary's office because everything they have there is confidential and serious. So the fact that we have in a locked envelope, in a bag, in a drawer is sufficient for confidentiality because no one is getting back there. I wander back there all the time because I talk to everybody, the grandmother, and everybody knows Tommy. And the volunteers who we have can wander back there. If you decide to be a volunteer with us, I give candy. They'll get to know you and not have a problem with you being there. Question? Oh, Brian, you look like you're going to say something. Okay. Yeah, okay. So confidentiality goes as far as just the basic paperwork we do has to be locked up and secure. So confidentiality goes that far. One of our interests right now, and I don't know if this is part of this, but I'm going to bring it up, is because modern technology, which isn't even modern anymore, it has been, you're not keeping stuff on your phone. We're not using, I love to use my speaker on my phone because I'm 102 and it makes it easy for me to hear. You're not sitting in the courthouse with the speaker on. So if you need to put the earplugs in and hold the phone right up to your ear, you are. You're doing that because people can hear what's happening. So what I'm going to do right now, since I've been running my mouth, I'm going to give you a break. I know you're like, oh, Tommy, don't stop. You're wonderful. We want you to keep talking. Yeah, we're going to give you a break. So according to my clock, it is 5:01. Since you're all home, 5 minutes? Someone shake your head, nod your head, dance the hokey pokey, say something. Okay, 5 minutes. So that means we're back at 5:06. All right. So I'm just going to make my face and my Oh, what'd I do? Where'd I go? Okay. We got 1 more minute. Oh, what you eating?
Pizza.
Ooh. I
Yeah.
have pizza in the refrigerator, but it's Wawa pizza. Big
Is it-
mistake.
I see Wawa has pizza. Is it any good?
It's okay if you don't live in Philly or around Philly or Delaware County or Bucks County, where
Yeah.
like you get good pizza.
Right.
Yeah. So
Good to know.
it's okay. You can take it home, put some garlic on it, put 100 other things on it, and it'll be passable. But no. Okay, so I guess people are coming back, but I'll wait a few more seconds for people to get back with us. Okay, here we come back. Hope you got your water. Got my water in my piggy cup. I like pigs. Okay, so to get on point. So you break confidentiality. Form the supervisor of the program you're in, and form the survivor. And it may be that the supervisor has to inform them. You may not want to, or that maybe the supervisor thinks it's better for them to do it. Remove yourself from the case. You ain't gotta. You don't have to remove yourself. We're gonna remove you yourself. Now, we may still let you volunteer or work for us, unless you did something like you told the news reporter or something. But um, we're gonna remove you from the case and from the files and any contact with that person. Another just little side about confidentiality. What confidence is important because of safety and trust, all that we discussed. Also, confidentiality is important because it's a small world and you don't know who knows who and you don't know who's going through what. So, as I said, domestic violence don't care where you live, don't care how much money you have. You can be in New Hope, you can be in West Philly, you can be in Bryn Mawr, Ardmore, you can be in Buckingham Palace. It doesn't care where you're at. So I said it to say you don't know who's been going through what and what's been happening behind closed doors. Another one of my many examples. Working at a DV program. We were all hanging out in the living room after a meeting discussing what was going to be for lunch. And if you work in offices, know that can be a conversation you can take forever. Someone wants pizza, someone wants sushi, someone wants whatever. So we're just like, what do you want? We kind of figure it out. We're still going back and forth. One of my coworkers comes in and says, I'm bringing a new woman in to the shelter. I want to do an intake. I need the room. We're like, fine, cool. We all jump up, run to the other room, and continue the in nauseam conversation about what to have for lunch. I realized the people left their bags and briefcases and backpacks in there. Well, several of us did. So instead of us all traipsing into that room and interrupting that meeting, that intake, I was going to go in and grab everybody's bag. I knocked on the door. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm not even looking up. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to bother you. We left our bags. I just want to get the bags. I'm out of here. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. The um, advocate was like, sure, fine. What you need to do? And the client was like, oh, all right. And the client didn't say anything. So I didn't look up. I just grabbed everybody's bags. And I came through the door and I just put everybody's bag on the floor. We continued the conversation of what we are going to have for lunch for another 20 minutes. So we're still talking. Staff person comes in to make copies of paperwork for the new person in the shelter. She comes and I was like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to go. She's like, oh, it's okay, it's all right. Carolyn was the woman at the time, a friend of mine. Carolyn goes into the copier. She's at the copier and it was in another room, and she lifts her head through the door. I'm like, oh, Tommy, by the way, she wants to talk to you. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Did I upset her? I mean, I know it's a big deal to come in here. She's like, oh, no, she says she's your cousin. I'm like, and I mean, like, yeah, I've been doing this for a while. Then it wasn't as long as now, but I did the training. I'm like, it can be anybody. I'm like, no, she's mistaken. There are people who look like me. Like, no, it's that woman who there's supposed a woman wandering around Norristown who looks exactly like me. It must be her. It's not me. I went through all my family members, so I'm like, who and what? Who did my mother say? And who at Thanksgiving was acting funny? And I'm like, she's mistaken. And I walk in the room and I'm like, it was my cousin. what confidentiality needed to be right then and there. And the first thing out my mouth was, well, the third or second thing out my mouth was, because first thing was like, are you okay? Do you need anything? The next thing was, one, you don't have to ever see me for your length of your stay here. If you don't want to see me, you ain't gonna see me. And also know that I will not say a blessed word that you were here. No one in the family will know from me that you were here and that I saw you. They will never know. And she was fine. I made it a point that I didn't even go down to the shelter because our office is one place and the shelter was in another, like it is at a woman's place. I didn't even go the first time there. Now, she did keep trying to reach me, and staff was like, you need to come talk to your cousin. She ain't acting right. And I'm like, nope, confidentiality. Nope, I get to stay out of it. Nope, 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 nope. But never said anything. I said, I'm not going to go home and go, Mom, guess my mother was alive then. Guess who I saw at the shelter? Never am going to say anything. That cousin left the shelter, moved out of state, talked to her several years later, around the time my mother passed. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, cousin Vivian's dead. How are you doing? I'm fine. Like, oh, so what did she think about me being in the shelter? Like, she ain't think nothing because I never told her. She's like, you never told her? Like, no, I told you I wasn't going to tell her. No, I never told her. In reality, she knows now because she's hopefully in heaven. So she's hearing you, if you believe that. So that's the only way she knows. I never said anything. She's like, oh, well, you could have told her. Like, no, I wasn't going to tell her. I'm not supposed to tell her. It's not my business to tell her. At that point, she said, well, if it comes up, if you need to tell people, you can tell people in your training. I'm like, okay, thank you. To end the story and make it even more a little weirder for you. So a cousin of mine who took the training because he wanted to be those ministers and people of faith who are with the police and the fire department, I forgot what they call them. What do they call him?
Chaplain?
Chaplain, yeah. He was going to be a chaplain. So he took the training because he thought the DB training would be good for being a chaplain running across DB program. And I'm telling this story. And he's sitting there and he's like, and I dawned on me, I looked at him and I went, and I ain't going to tell you who it was. It was just one of our cousins. You still ain't going to know. And he even passed and still didn't know who it was. So I say confidentiality is important because you don't know who, you don't know who you're going to run into. In court Wednesday, I was with a client who was stressed. She's sitting there. She turns around, looks at the woman behind her and said, don't I know you? It was a girl she babysitted back in the day who was there also. So you don't know who knows who, so you don't necessarily want to share as party information or entertainment because you don't know who knows who. We would like to think no one we know is in a situation like this, but we don't know that. Because again, domestic violence hides very well. And it does not care who you are. So the system and the news media would like to tell you that it's only happening in Norristown, Bristol, parts of Ben Salem, never in New Hope, never in Levittown, never in Society Hill, never in Chestnut Hill, West Philly, North Philly, South Philly, of course, University City, but since they've cleaned it up and it's all college students, never there. It is happening everywhere, and a victim doesn't look one specific way. The victim we see is the victim who's tied up in other collateral agencies and may be forced to be there, or circumstances make it that they have to be there. My other issue not issue, but my other horse that I beat along with male victims is victims of affluence. Because a victim who lives in New Hope or Ardmore, Bryn Mawr, people are going to be like, well, they make money, they got money, they live in a mansion, they got good money. It is just as easy, it is just as hard for a victim who has money to leave as it is for a victim who has no money. It doesn't matter. So if we go back to confidentiality, you can't be in a room with people who are making a couple million and be like, well, they don't have this problem, so I can share these stories. You don't know that. And my other story with you is I have a friend who, and I love saying that, she works for a for-profit social service agent. It's a conglomerate that does social services across, like in England and France and some places here. And they're a multi-million-dollar agency. And so with me, she makes a lot of money. I go to her house, go to Christmas, we're at a Christmas party, talking, laughing, and someone says to me, someone wants to talk to you. I'm used to that at work when it's work time, someone wants to talk to you. Oh, who wants to talk to me? They want to talk to me. Ooh. So I go into the room to talk to him, and this person wants to talk to me about their sister-in-law who lives next door, who's at the party, whose husband is abusive. Another time I was there was about some woman whose son's girlfriend was abusive. And these were people who, like, the parking lot. My car was a hoopty in the parking lot. My little Toyota RAV4 was a hoopty with everything else rolled up. I say that to you for confidentiality purposes. You don't know who knows who. And I'll give you this last one before I change the slide. I had a volunteer training who had said she wanted to do this. And she is now doing it at Temple University. And she was a survivor. And the thing that she would always say, especially when we were in training, and then when she became a speaker for me, was when she was in the height of her domestic violence and had been hospitalized several times and had her jaw broken several times, when she was on her way to work back in the day to the law firm where she was a clerk, in her sneakers and high heels in her bag, no one ever knew what she was going through at home. No one had the idea. She said, you'd have passed me on the street and just thought, look at that well-dressed woman who has it all together. I wonder how she broke her jaw. Oh, I think she told him she was like I'm sorry, that you ride those things behind the boat, the skis behind the boat. Water skiing? Okay. She told him she did something like that and how she broke her jaw. I don't quite know how that happens doing that, but I'm not getting on water like that, so I wouldn't know. But she said no one would ever know. So again, I go back to for confidentiality. You don't know who you're around.
She was riding the wake.
I don't know. She was on those skis tied to the back of a boat. Was the story he
I
told.
think as you riding the wake on the boat. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know why you would do that. So if that is something you do, I will have people pray for you because I don't understand it. I need terra firma. I need concrete under me. I barely do cruise ships, but now they're full of COVID. So yeah, no. Did I go backwards? Oh, no, okay. Keeping clients' records. So we discussed records. Our records are in a special location. We don't have access to stuff that I do and my staff does and our volunteers do. I put in the box. Shelter staff files them, puts it up. Mostly everything is on a secured program we use called ETO. ETO is where we put in our case notes in short form. You guys will never have to do that. We'll get that information for you and put it in because it is highly protected. Who gets to put stuff in ETO? I will say ETO is wonderful and it's also bane of my existence because I'm old school. I'm paper and pencil, but I respect ETO because can no one break into it? When ETO first came about for doing our case notes and following cases, it is used by a number of different agencies, not just DV agencies. The big conversation was, how does our stuff remain secure? Can you hear that tingle, tingle, tingle? Okay, good. Then I won't worry about cutting it off. Our big question was like, we don't want welfare or Social Security or the homeless program being able to access our information in ETO. So that became a 2-year conversation before ETO was even implemented. So they cannot access. So we put stuff in there. There are firewalls. We have a firewall on top of firewalls for ETO. So that's where the majority of information goes. Any paperwork, which is minimal, is filed in the shelter. I honestly don't know. I know they file it. I know they have whined at me because I put in like 3 months worth of paperwork at one time. And they were like, could y'all just hand the stuff in weekly and not at one time? So I don't know where they file, where they keep. I don't want to know, don't need to know. But there's no access just for confidentiality. And it's purged every so often. I don't know how often we purge, but we do purge. Record keeping. We also have to keep and ask questions for statistical purposes. So you might, no one ever likes running domestic violence commercials, so you don't see them anymore. But the one there was don't even run anymore. Like Ford used to have one in October for domestic violence month where you could buy this scarf. The money went to whatever. You'll hear like 1 in 4 women, whatever number of men. That statistic. The statistic comes from the information that we collect, but it's collected confidentially. So we're not giving names. We'll just give, the ages, races, sometimes income levels. That goes into that statistic building. Yeah, so information that you keep them in. If you're in my program and you're helping with clients on Wednesdays who go to PFA court and contempt court, I give candy. Or you're a volunteer in the pathonetary's office once a week for several hours, helping people fill out their applications. You will do the paperwork and turn it in. The volunteers who do Wednesdays for PFA court and contempt court, hand their paperwork in immediately to Megan, who is the coordinator for our legal program. So that's handed to her. If you're with me and the pathonetary's office, you put it in the lockdown envelope, and I get it every Wednesday. And if I get more volunteers, then it'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We'll have someone there every day. This is me sucking up in case you couldn't tell. Candy.
Tommy, what are the hours on the days that your volunteers help you out?
For which one? So if it's Wednesdays, we're now there. They say 8:30, but you don't have to get there till 9-ish.
Mhm.
And on a good day, you could be out by 12. On a medium day, out by 2. On a really rough day, 4 o'clock. Rough days rarely ever happen. And if it's a rough day and you're like, I have a life to live, I have to go to work, we'll take over the case for you. But most days you're out of there by 1 o'clock. For the pathonetary volunteers, I say 10 to 1. The only thing would be run a little longer would be if there's an ex parte hearing that runs late, but they tend not to run late. So they'll either have their ex parte hearing like around 11:30, 11, or 1:30, and they really don't take. An ex parte hearing can take like 5-10 minutes, if that. So probably around 1:30. And then again, if you have to go, the person will just go to the ex parte without you. And we'll do that in detail tomorrow at 10 a.m. Where are we at? So our statistics are for funders. So yes, almost everyone that I have ever worked with in this field does it because either volunteer or do it because it has a place in their heart, in their soul. But as I say, I have to pay the gas company. The gas company in Philadelphia likes to get paid. I like heat. I need water. I still don't understand why I have to pay for the water, but I have to pay for the water. So I have to give the water company money. My car has to be paid for. So I do want to get some money. How do we get money for our program? From a number of places. It is a juggling program. So when you see Jen Lockhart, and if you ever, and I don't know if Michelle, who is our accountant, is going to present, they are our saviors. They are juggling balls to get us money. Money comes from, so, and this is a part of confidentiality, but explains why, because you may want to know, well, you said we can't tell anybody anything, but we're collecting race, age, income, neighborhood section, because the funders we have want to know who we're serving. So when we do our grant writing, it's because in this community, there are X number of victims that we know of who've come to us for services. So we're not saying who they are, what they went through, but we've served 18 PFAs this month. We've talked to whatever. So it's basic information, but it's for funders because that's where our money comes from. And it's from the federal government, from a number of federal government agencies, state agencies from the state, from the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, PCAR, which I forget what those initials for, but they're rape programs. PCCD, I'm the only social worker on the planet who hates initials. PCCD, which is Pennsylvania Crime and Delinquency something, private donors. We also need people donating stuff. Not always all the stuff they want to donate to us. Like we don't need right now 5,000 diapers that are too big for the kids we have, but we'll take it. So it's in kind donations, but for the fiscal, so that we can pay people, so we can pay our gas bill, our electric bill in the building, and we can pay our staff. Also paying staff mileage because Bucks County is a long county. I worked in Montgomery County and I was like, Bucks is bigger. And I'm like, no, it's not bigger, it's longer. So to go from Bristol to Levittown, Quakertown. So we have to pay for mileage for people for them doing their mileage. So we have to collect statistics for our reporting purpose. Oh yeah, the Department of Human Services gives us money. And everybody gives us a little bit, but they all want to act like they're giving us tons of money and they're just giving us a lot. But if you quote me on that, I'll say they're all wonderful programs. We're still on files, we're documenting. Shelter documents, legal us through RISE does. And it's minimal information. We want the date of birth, address, gender, pronouns are just for us, address, race, income if we can get it. I tend not to ask income, it is important. Our race and date of birth, what town and police department they're from. Something that I'm still wrapping my mind around because I'm a Philly girl. We got downtown, Center City, and the neighborhoods. You in Bucks County have Bristol Borough, Bristol Township, Doyle's Town, Doyle's Township, Doyle's Borough. So I've wrapped them out. Why can't it just be downtown, Doylestown? But don't ask me. So I'm wrapping my mind around it. But that's a distinction that makes sense, which is the distinction when I worked at Women Against Abuse, whether it was West Philly, South Philly, so that you can calculate. I will not go into my reasons why I have issues with those statistics, but I do have issues. So it's minimal information. Make sure I'm not going too long, run out of time. Back to, I originally talked about what we're not putting in the files. We're not putting in poems, statements. If they do a victim impact statement, we're not going to put that in there. It's very little paperwork. We're not keeping anything for safekeeping. Photos, they need to keep their own photos because we don't want it used against them. We used to, when I was at Laurel House in Montgomery County, we used to have a safe where we kept stuff. We stopped doing that, so no one keeps anything anymore. We kept the safe for if you have something you want to keep in safekeeping, because the rooms don't have locks on the doors. So for safekeeping. Then we would do weapons. So if you have a weapon, then PCADV said to us, we don't want to keep anybody's weapons. That's not cool. Because people would leave and leave the weapons behind. And we don't want your weapons. And there would be the strangest a collection of weapons. And you're thinking guns and knives. No, banister spindles. Do you know what banister spindles are? The thing to keep the top of the banister and the bottom of the banister together. So one woman once had, and I saw 3 of these, but one day, my first time seeing one, I was asked the woman if she had any weapons. And she said, well, I have my stick. I'm like, yeah, your stick. What's your stick? She had a spindle with a big old nail sticking out of it. I'm like, yeah, you can't keep that in your room. We gotta keep that. But we no longer keep weapons. So there was people with knives and guns, sticks with nails in them. My all-time favorite, the sock with the D batteries in it. The wasp spray. So for your own personal safety, because I am no longer allowed to tell clients about this, for your own personal safety, I think tear gas and it's still illegal in the state of Pennsylvania. So you're only buying pepper spray when you buy those little things. But if you buy wasp spray's main ingredient, I'm full of useless information this job has put in my head. The main ingredient in wasp spray is tear gas. And it shoots further away. So if you want to drive in your car with a can of wasp spray for the carjacker, but I didn't say that. And we used to tell clients that at one program I was in until the executive director was like, you tell one more person that.
Good to know, Tommy. Thank you.
Gladly, would you like, you tell one more person. You're not, none of y'all gonna be employed. I can replace you all. We're like, okay, I'll stop. I'll stop. The stuff we're in keeping. Let me move your little head so you can read this. As I said, can be in the wrong hands. As I said before, you don't want to use against the victim. And you might say their lawyer wants to have it. Yeah, but what'll happen if their lawyer has it and has to give it to somebody? Oh, role play. Okay, it's hard to role play when we're doing Zoom. So, wait a minute, let me see where I am. What did this one? Wait. Recorder. Any questions while I'm leafing through my papers? Come on, folks, gotta want to know something. You don't have any.
Same question yesterday. Is it possible to email us a copy of this slide deck? Because I might want to go back and see, just refer to it.
I know it's being recorded, which I kind of forgot about, so I'm acting really jerky and it's being recorded. Okay. Hopefully I'm still employed Monday. It is being recorded, and I don't think there's a reason. That is a question for Jasmine and Shannon when they show back up. This originally was Jen's PowerPoint, except for that stuff about me. So I don't think there shouldn't be a reason, but there's also a recording of this too. But you might want the recording without my goofiness.
I like
So
you.
well, thank you. Thank you. I don't feel bad. So role plays are hard to do here, but what we're gonna do, I always have a way of doing stuff. So we're gonna stop sharing this. And what we're gonna do, I'm gonna minimize you. Okay. Okay, there we go. We're gonna minimize that, minimize this, just minimize it. Aw, okay. Think about something brilliant. Why I have to open up something. Think of questions. Gotta have a question. I thought I left this open, but I didn't, so I have to open it again. Oh, come on. Okay. Well, don't ask me questions then. That's okay. I found what I was looking for anyway. Where are you guys? There you are. And it is. Okay. So, can you see that? Not yet. There you go. Now you can see it. So this is the first scenario. Scenario, the video. So this is the part of the presentation that I used to hate when I was in school, being a good old dyslexic. Someone gets to read scenario 1. There's enough scenarios for everyone to read a scenario. Who wants to volunteer first?
I can do it.
All right, go for it.
Okay.
Tell me when you need me to move a slide down.
All right. Joanne has been attending support group on Wednesday night with other shelter residents. The evening shelter manager facilitates the group, and the group members choose the topic areas. Often, it is not a specific topic, but rather conversations about their experiences and feelings and plans. On this particular night, one of the women in the group disclosed that her abuser had forced her to terminate a pregnancy. She said her abuser didn't want any little brats running around and told her she certainly would be a lousy mother. The woman was very upset as she told the group about this. Later that evening, Joanne was using the payphone on the second floor of the residence, and Mary, one of the members of the support group, heard Joanne say to whoever she was talking to, "One of the women in here had an abortion. Her abuser made her do it, but I don't think it could have happened that way, because she'd have to sign to get it done. I can't believe she killed her baby." Upon hearing this, Mary went to the shelter manager and told her. When Joanne and the Thank you. When Joanne and the other shelter residents came into the shelter rules were reviewed and signed by the victim and the counselor advocate. One of the rules was that all shelter residents had to maintain confidentiality regarding the other victims and their children in shelter and the location of the shelter. Should I keep going?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If a battered woman discloses information to a third party about another victim, is this a breach of confidentiality under the statute? Explain.
Okay, we'll stop there. So is this, and even if you haven't looked, some of you are going now, what statute? I didn't read no statute. So forget statute. Is this cool?
No.
Okay. Should the shelter services be terminated for such a disclosure?
I think it depends on, I don't know, was there a contract within the group that they weren't going to share each other's? I think
Yes.
it depends on how the group was set up and what their the group policies were.
Yeah, so the group will always have this confidentiality. What's said in the group stays in the group. You don't share that information.
Okay.
So are we terminating services?
I don't know. This is hard.
She didn't use her name when she was talking about it, but it's still wrong.
But you don't know who knows who.
That's true.
So the friend she's talking to could be someone, could be her coworker.
Yeah.
So it depends on the agency's policy. So it may mean if the agency has more than one support group, then removing this person from this support group and putting him in another support group. It may be terminating, but it is going to be a conversation about confidentiality and privacy. If Joanne requests shelter at a later time, should the shelter be denied because of the situation? Nodding the head is not an answer to the question. As my mother used to say, open your mouth, let your teeth stick out. Never knew what that meant, but say something.
I mean, I would say that you shouldn't deny her because of the situation and give her another chance, but I don't know. I don't know.
So would you? So you ran this is Molly, this is your shelter. This is Molly's shelter for whatever you want to call it, for sunshine and light.
Okay.
Would you let her come in?
No. I guess no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't be able to trust her.
Okay, so your reason you would be able to trust her. Would anybody else who had their own shelter?
I think I would let her still come in. I think I have to, because she probably is needing the shelter because she's in danger. And that should be prioritized.
All right. So you cannot, so you're both right, and it can be handled this way. So we're not letting her into Molly's shelter of sunshine and light, but Maddie's shelter of light and sunshine wants to let her in, but we'll send her to Michael's shelter. So instead of Bucks County, so I'll stop using people's names, so I'm gonna get confused. So she came to Bucks County, she was in a support group in Bucks County. We had just concerns about her being able to hold confidentiality. The woman she talks about is still there. We can have her call other shelter programs, because there is a DV shelter in every county. I believe there's 56 counties. I might be off. Each one has, except for one, I think there's 2 upstate who share a shelter. They all have a shelter, so it's just calling to another shelter program. So we may not be the right place for her if that client is still there. If we have concerns about, as Molly said, I don't know if we wouldn't say trust you, but if we don't know if you have the ability to follow these guidelines. So we can still provide her with help, just not with us, maybe. Maybe she can go to Philly. Philly has 200 beds. So maybe she can go to get in the Philadelphia shelter.
Tommy, though, is it correct that not using a name would be significant in thinking about it?
Not, I mean, if I'm sitting on the fence, that might lead me to for a little bit of I can help you, but you're still sharing my stuff. You're still sharing my information. And sometimes I don't need names to know what goes on. Just an example being, I don't know names well. Like you guys all remember what your names because I have a face to put with it. But if I only see you once, your name is not in your head. If your name and face aren't together, I'm not gonna remember names. That's just part of my dyslexia and also defense mechanism for being an advocate. And we will have meetings and we'll talk about folks. And until they start saying what happened, then we'll go, like, oh yeah, I remember that person. So I say that to say, you might not have used my name, but my story might click with somebody. So that's so not using the name. You might switch me over to like, okay, you had enough not to use the name, but still you share it. Okay, I'm
Yep.
getting ready.
I
Yes,
understand.
I'm getting ready to do something. We'll see if it happens. Okay, can you see scenario 2? Say something. Can you see 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if y'all just staring at me. Okay, who wants to volunteer to do 2?
I can do 2.
Okay.
All right, scenario 2, you are a shelter advocate and Rose is a resident. One day she returns visibly upset. She also has a red mark on her cheek. You ask her if she's okay and if she wants to talk. She declines. The next day, Rose leaves the shelter and you don't hear from her again. 2 weeks later, you receive a message from the local police asking if you've seen her. You decline to confirm. The police tell you they know she was there and they don't want to hear about the communications you had with her. They just want to know what she looked like and how she acted the last time you saw her. Can you tell them? I would say no. I think she did the right thing by saying no, and you still can't.
Anybody else? Any other opinions?
I would go with no as well.
Does
Yeah,
anybody else?
that's a no.
Okay.
No, without a subpoena, maybe you get a court order.
You can court order us all you want to, and you can subpoena till your little cows come home. No.
Yeah. So I'm agreeing.
Okay,
But
yeah.
maybe if
So
you get
no.
a court order.
No, you can get a court order. So no.
All right.
So she did right. Just no, we can't say anything. We're fine. I kind of gave you that one already. Who wants to do 3?
I have a quick question about that one.
Yes.
Right. The police call. I'm the one who answers, and they ask, and I say I cannot confirm or deny. Somehow they produce a subpoena. I still say I cannot confirm or deny. This is something we refer to legal and let them continue to argue with the authorities.
You're not accepting the subpoena. They need to go over to the Rodman office and they need to find Jen, our executive director, and give it to her.
Okay, so refer it to the executive director and continue to say I cannot confirm or deny.
Yeah. You gotta see Jen. She just took over that job. She's probably regretting it right now in this scenario. But yeah, you give it to her. That's not for us to deal with. It's over our pay grade. And as a volunteer, you don't even have a pay grade. So we don't know. You gotta see the executive director, see one of a couple lawyers we have. Nope.
Wait, then can I ask you this question? Then can you tell the police that you can reach my executive director and speak to her or him instead?
If they push it, yeah, but I wouldn't even entertain the conversation with them.
Okay.
I can't tell you anything. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Because if you get drawn, the more you get drawn into a conversation, the more you might give information without even meaning to. And y'all ain't paid enough for that. And you're not paid at all. So it's like, hey, I don't know what to tell you. You can give them the business number and say, hey, call this number Monday morning and talk to them.
Yeah. Okay.
But I wouldn't even get into it with them. Like, nah, I can't help you. I don't know nothing.
I have a quick question. Is there another way to say I can't confirm or deny? Can you say I don't know, or is that like the phrase that we have to use?
That's your best phrase. If you stick to one phrase, you won't get caught up.
Very true.
Because you might run into somebody like me and see, I saw you last week. Yeah. I was just wondering, the person we saw that I brought over. When I finished, I'm not really good at it, but when I finished talking to you, you done told me stuff you weren't supposed to tell me.
Yeah.
Which I've done. But not in this, it's about who's dating who and who did what. So it's just good to say I cannot confirm or deny. Now, when you get in the shelter, if you work volunteering in the shelter, they may give you another phrase. It's never going to come up if you're volunteering with me and I give you candy. You're not going to have to deal with that because You're in the same room with abusers at the other end of the hallway, defendants. Sorry, we're not supposed to call them abusers. They're at the other end of the hallway. If they were to come to you or to the client, the sheriffs are always there. So that they can stop them. And if the sheriff's not there, I'm always there. And the best part of my job is being mean to people who deserve my meanness and my sort of venom. So we'll just push them away and tell them, go where you belong. So we have the sheriff. Sometimes it's the sheriff with the dog. The dog is fun. The dog will growl at them. So you will never be, as you're volunteering in a shelter for the hotline, you'll rarely ever be put in that position. And most people know not to call. The cops know not to call now. This isn't 20 years ago where they were like running roughshod. They know not to call. The people that call are people like me, and they send emails and texts and faxes or to the counseling program. You really wouldn't have that. I think we're on 3. Who wants to do 3?
I'll do it.
I
Jenny is a shelter resident. She does not have a job at this time because her abuser did not allow her to work. After speaking to Sandy, the welfare advocate at the shelter, she called the county assistance office and made an appointment. Jenny was very nervous about going to the welfare office and asked Sandy to accompany her. Sandy accompanied her and sat in on the interview. And during the interview, Jenny disclosed to her caseworker disclosed to her caseworker the domestic violence, since she felt she needed to explain why she hadn't been employed. The caseworker explained the requirements, including good cause for reset and child support. The application was completed, and Jenny chose to try the 8-week job search. Several days later, the caseworker called Sandy. He simply wanted to confirm that Jenny was still in the shelter. Can Sandy confirm that Jenny is still in the shelter since she was present during the interview at the welfare office? Why or why not?
Why or why not? Can she confirm?
That was then, this is now, and I cannot confirm or deny.
Righty then. But how do I get the information? I saw you there. What do you mean you can't tell me?
Well, I feel like if that person who called, like if that person knows his job, I mean his or her job, he would have asked for consent to Jenny first instead of calling Sandy.
But true. But you're talking about the welfare department. They're overworking, tired, and they're just gonna call. But you're right. They should know better. And that's kind of gonna be the leg you can stand on. Like you know you shouldn't be asking me this. So you know what you gotta do. But if they say they don't know what they want to, they don't, how do I get that information? What is your response to them?
I cannot confirm.
You have another response you could use because you're an advocate.
I would try to get off the phone with them as soon as possible and then tell the client, like, because it's in her best interest for them to know she's still in the shelter, because I'm sure her benefits are contingent on that. So I would just get off the phone with them and then tell Jenny that, look, we need to figure out a way to get and confirm you're still here with and have her do it. So it's her sharing that information, not us.
Yeah, good out of the box. And if you want to get, and this is where you can get tied up, but like, well, if you did have a client who was in a program that I would have happened to see, you would get a release of information. But as Maddie said, you should already know that. So what are we doing for time? Got about 14 minutes. Let's do another one. Who wants to read? It's a short one.
I'll do this one, Tom, if that's okay. Is that all right with you?
Okay. Yeah.
Listen, I'm on a phone, so.
I got you.
Oh my gosh, I should get my readers. Sally received services at the center 2 years ago as a participant in support. Wait a minute, as a participant in support in group. Sorry. You're walking down the street and you see another group member, Rita. She approaches you and she hugs you. You chat for a while and Rita asks you about Sally. Can you tell Rita you haven't seen Sally in 2 years? Can you tell her what's going on in Sally's life? Can you tell Rita anything if it has been 7 years since you spoke to Sally?
Can't. You can't tell her anything.
No, ma'am. No.
It used to be, which I think is still a good rule of thumb, and thank you. Thank you, all my readers. I think it's still a good rule of thumb, which is not a good phrase to use. So I don't know if you've gotten over why we shouldn't say rule of thumb. A good reason you shouldn't do that. One thing we used to do, I'm sorry, I'm getting myself confused. We used to have back in the day, if you saw any ex-client resident in the street, you didn't acknowledge them, you waited for them to acknowledge you. For me, who's a talker and I'm becoming a hugger, I'm not really I'm trying to become one. It's hard for me as a talker to like see you and not speak to you, especially if I remember who you are, because I don't remember people. But we never acknowledged anyone. We waited till they acknowledged us. Why? Because you don't know who they're standing next to. My biggest remembrance of that was a friend of mine who was a children's counselor at a program I was in. Kids loved him. Whereas Christmas, just before Christmas, we're buying stuff to put in our Christmas store for the kids to come shop, and we're at Walmart, I believe. And I'm standing there looking at something, and it was Tanisha. She's moved to Texas since then. Why Texas, I don't know. So we're standing there, and all of a sudden she grabs me by my arm and throws me to the ground. I'm like, why are you doing this? I'm a peace-loving person. People don't do this to me. And she said, shut up. And she pulled me to the ground, and we're behind, like, the stores used to have material. So we're hiding behind all this material. And I started laughing because I'm like, why am I on the ground in Walmart on the floor, hiding behind material? And she's like doing this. I'm like, what are we doing? What's happening? She saw one of her children from the children's program in the shelter who used to be in the shelter. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, and Tanisha was always, any kid saw, I was like, Miss Tanisha, and they'd come running. So, okay, that's why we're hiding. She's like, yeah, we're hiding because the man that woman's standing next to is her abuser. She went back to him. So we were hiding behind the bolts of material, having Walmart, it was Walmart staff looking at us very funny and crawling, when these were better than, crawling out of the material department into hardware and running out the back of the Walmart. Because you'll run into people, and you'll run into people who want to see you, who don't want to see you. I've run into people who were like, why aren't you talking to me? I'm like, because I don't know who you're standing next to. And the woman was like, I would never stand next to him ever again. I ran into I was at a bar. Yeah, I do go to bars from time to time. And this man kept looking at me. And I was like, yeah. And then he finally came over. He's like, remember me? Well, evidently not. Like, and it clicked in my head. Oh yeah, yeah, I remember you. Not saying where. He's like, thank you, you were wonderful. It was very helpful. So again, I say that to say you don't know who they're with, who they're out there with. So you're not even, forget not telling this person, but you're not acknowledging them because you don't know what their life entailed, what ended up happening. Let's do one more. Any volunteers? Anybody not read? Other than me. Okay. All right. Yes.
Scenario 5. Stephanie Esquire is a board member for your program and is in fact a member of the executive committee. Though it is not a requirement for board members, Stephanie chose to complete the 40-hour domestic violence training offered by the program for new staff and direct services volunteers, as well as the 5-hour practicum. She has not served as a direct services volunteer. Becky is a current shelter resident. In the past, Stephanie represented Becky in filing a complaint because the abuser violated a PFA by stalking Becky. Becky later returned to the abuser, then left again and came to the shelter. Stephanie heard that Becky was in shelter and asked the program director if she can see Becky's file. She reminds the director that she has completed the 45-hour training and has been Becky's attorney. Do you let Stephanie see the file? Why or why not? Does it make a difference that there is a past consent to release information to Stephanie in the file? would it make a difference if the reason Stephanie wants to see the file is because Becky called her and filed an internal complaint against her shelter counselor / advocate?
Okay.
I would say no, because we know that those releases, aren't long lasting.
Mhm. Also, let's get all our questions back. So, should Stephanie see the file? No. Does it make a difference she had to pass consent? You already said no, because it was time sensitive. Would it make a difference if the reason Stephanie wants to see the file is because Becky called her up? So we're not sharing that information. And in reality, the new board member / volunteer needs to not be in the shelter while the client's there. They should not be both in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason for them to be together. We put it that way because sometimes board members carry some weight, but we don't no, confidentiality is confidentiality. She might have gotten a new attorney. She might have stopped with her because she couldn't pay her. Who knows? But again, the biggest part is her release of information is no longer good. Thank you to all my readers. That did not go without my recognizing it, because reading out loud is a bit traumatizing for me, but I've gotten over it as an old dyslexic. So I thank you for that. We're a couple minutes early. I know Jen may be popping on. I don't know how this works, because y'all really lucky I got myself signed in. So I don't know if I go away and she comes back. But what I can do for the last few seconds is answer any questions you have and talk about tomorrow.
I have one question, and you might have said it. I might have missed it. Do they run a conflict check for employees and volunteers when the victim comes in? Do they run a conflict check in terms of people knowing each other, that kind of thing, or no? Just the perpetrator side of it.
Yeah. So you can go work there. Like my cousin, there was never any.
Right. Okay.
It was just there. We do checks in the pathonetry's office when you're filing for a PFA and you're not already in our system. We'll do a conflict check. But that's about the only time that we do a conflict check. And that's for defendant and plaintiff, if there's a connection with the needs. But no, because it's a small world. It's a small world. It happens all. It happened between me and my cousin. It happened. I had a volunteer class when I used to do the volunteer training. I would, at the end of training, was a tour of the shelter, and I had a volunteer at that time. I think she's Cass. She was a reverend, and she was doing the tour. Then she disappeared. Found her on the porch. Why are you on the porch? She's like, "Oh, I probably shouldn't be in there." Okay, wait a minute. Volunteers are hard to come by. This is only like the last day you're almost done. How you talking about you shouldn't be here? She's like, "Oh, it was like her nephew or cousin's wife she passed her, she saw her in the hallway. And she said, we were wondering what happened to her. But evidently my nephew, the abuser was a family member of her. Evidently he was doing something he had no business doing. And I didn't want her to see me and then think this wasn't a safe place. And I know I needed to tell you that." So it happens all the time, because people, you don't know who knows who. And as I said, females can be abusers, men can be abusers, it doesn't care. Same-sex relationships, opposite-sex relationship, it doesn't matter. We have had women who have called shelters that I've worked in trying to get into a shelter program, chasing their victim. So you don't know. It's up to someone to let you know that they're in there. They know someone. And so volunteers are going to say, staff are going to say. A lot of times the shelter people are going to say that this is my cousin, co-worker, or whatever. They're going to let you know.
Oh, you know what? The house is shaking again, y'all. I think we're having an aftershock. My house is shaking.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty close. I'm pretty close to where it was.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah, the house is shaking. No, the house is shaking. Oh, yeah.
Okay, Sarah, you're freaking us out with that.
Wow. Listen, it's the earth has to move. If the earth doesn't move, it's going to be bad. It has
Well,
to
my
shake
thing-
and rumble and roll.
I thought it was thunder. I did just hear something. I thought it was thunder.
Mm-mm.
But you
No,
might be
no.
right.
I felt a little rumble.
It's shaking.
The earth is like you humans are jacking up stuff and I'm trying to shake you off. You're
Yes.
messing up stuff and I'm trying to shake you off.
Keep playing around, see what happens.
Yeah, we're trying to shake you off. So I'm assuming she's going to get in. Any last minute questions before I jump off and we see what happens? Okay, so I'm back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And if I was in person, I'd have candy to give candy. So wherever you choose to volunteer, I mean, it's probably, I would say it's inappropriate for me to solicit getting volunteers, but Shannon told me to do it, so I can do it. But volunteer wherever you want. We're happy to have you. We thank you for giving your time. What do they say in churches? It doesn't go unrecognized that you are giving freely of your time. So this is not something you want to be paid for. If you want to be paid for in a later date, cool beans. If whatever you want to be a board member, whatever, cool beans. Anything you do would be good. We thank you for giving up your time. This is 40 hours. People like me prattle on and tell you boring stories, but we thank you for this. The women, children, and men we serve are thankful for you being there. If you are, I can't tell you the number of times that I have run into survivors in the Justice Center / courthouse who have said, "Oh, thank you, you helped me out." I've been talking to someone and they said, "Oh, she's from a woman's place," and they've said, "Oh, she's here." They've said, "Hey, yeah, they're great people. They work." The sheriff department is constantly saying, "Yeah, you're good." I've had the sheriff come and get me because there was someone downstairs who needed to talk to someone or grabbed a volunteer. So know that we appreciate and thank you for your time for doing this. This is Jen here. You want to tell her that I was absolutely wonderful and I was the best presentation. Well, I don't have to be the best, but that I was wonderful because she is my boss. So tell her that I was wonderful. I will give you candy at a later date. I'm big on candy. I only give a nickel for money. For those who want money, I only give me a nickel. So now, Jen, if I just end, will it end you, or should I just leave it on and just walk away?
If you can reassign me as the host, that's probably what'll be best. I'm sorry, the lighting is very odd down here.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
I can leave you on and cut you and cut off my mic and my picture and lower the volume.
Okay, that's fine too.
Because you're plugged in, so I won't listen because I got stuff to do.
Well, thank you for jumping in last minute. I know it was supposed to be me from 4 to 6, and Tommy saved me vastly by coming in and helping out for a little bit. So thank you, Tommy.
No problem. This my last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up. This means I can't do my ETO right now, but I'll do it tomorrow.
Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, Tommy. That was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tommy. It's good to meet you.
All right, so do you all need a break for a few minutes or you want to just keep on rolling? We will just keep on going then. It sounds like Tommy went over confidentiality with you guys. Or did she do shelter with you all? Confidentiality, perfect. Okay. So let me share my screen. We'll get started on hotline, shelter, and rapid rehousing. All right, can you all see the PowerPoint? Okay, all right. So we will jump in, but just quickly, my name is Jen. I am the executive director here at A Woman's Place. I've been with AWP from about 2013, so I've been here almost 11 years. Starting out in the shelter, kind of working my way up, and just moved into the executive director role a couple of months ago. So I am taking over shelter for tonight because we are currently looking to hire for our shelter manager. And so since this was once my role, I will kind of lead you through it as we spend the next 2 hours together. Okay, so today, like I said, we'll talk about hotline, shelter, and then the rest of our housing program, which is mostly rapid rehousing. We'll spend quite a bit of time talking about the types of calls that we take at hotline, how we work with folks who are calling into hotline, and then the referral process for how we get them connected with folks. We'll go over some of the tools that we use when we're trying to determine risk in terms of bringing someone into shelter or other sorts of risks they might be encountering. And then last, we talk about practice skills through role-playing scenarios. It is more of a video, so you will not quite have to role play with us, but we will go through watching some videos and then discussing that afterwards. So there it goes. All right, so to start off, I'm just going to kind of walk through the staff that we have that staff these programs. So in our safe house, like I mentioned, we are currently hiring for a shelter manager. Outside of that, we have our safe house case manager, and so she's the one that's providing case management to our families in the shelter, usually twice a week. Her name is Kelly. The staff that staff the building the rest of the time are considered our resident counseling advocates, and so that team is Jack, Sheena, Dominique, Meg, and Maddie. And then outside of that, when we're needing additional assistance with coverage, we have some of our per diem folks, and that would be Mindy, Raina, Nicole, and Maddie. And then the hotline runs through our shelter, and so these folks who are staffing the building are also the same ones that are going to be answering the hotline for any calls coming through. Second is our rapid rehousing program, which is run by Marissa, and then underneath her is a rapid rehousing advocate, Amanda, and then a domestic violence intake specialist, Blair. Okay, so we'll talk about Rapid first. This is our newest program. We've started this program only just a couple of years ago, and the focus of it is a housing first model. And so what that means is that we are trying to support folks in getting into housing regardless of barriers. It's with the idea that if you're able to safely house somebody first, that you can much more thoroughly work on the other barriers they're experiencing rather than starting with barriers and working towards housing. So with this program, it is short-term financial assistance to help the families maintain their housing. And so what short-term looks different for different households that are enrolled, depending on their income, depending on barriers. A plan is kind of worked through together in order to determine how much short-term that looks like. For some folks, it's just moving cost. For other folks, it's up to 2 years of assistance in their unit. Typically for all of our folks, we pay full moving costs. So that would cover first class security, especially in today's day and age where they're requiring even more and more to move in. It's very rare that folks have enough money to be able to get into a unit with assistance. And I realize this says up to 12 months, that's the standard, but we can do an extension for an additional year if the client is really in need. Through this time, there's a plan that's agreed upon to kind of taper down so that we're decreasing how much we're paying, they are increasing how much they're paying so that they can gradually work to paying the full bill on their own. Okay, so most of our folks are coming right from the shelter. Those tend to be the clients that we work with who are the most at risk, who have the most barriers, the least support systems, and so that they are most likely the ones that we're enrolling into shelter. Other places we can receive referrals from shelter are the other AWP programs, which includes counseling, victim response, civil legal representation. And then sometimes through the county as well, there is Housing Link, which is kind of the hub in Bucks County for all of the housing services who are working together to end homelessness. So if they have folks calling in through there who are fleeing from domestic violence, they'll get referred out to us as well. Further into who's eligible for our rapid rehousing program, they must meet Category 4 definition of homelessness. So what you'll see that is here, they have to be somebody who is attempting to flee or fleeing domestic violence. They have no other safe residence, and they lack the resources or support to obtain permanent housing. That is really the only mandatory required eligibility category in accordance with our grant. We also, depending on the grant funding stream or how much funding we have, we may add this prioritization in of having to fall 50% below the AMI based on family size, just because we're limited and want to make sure we're supporting the folks who are in the highest need. But even that, you can see that's quite low. So a family of 4 that are 50% is a salary of just under $56,000. In terms of where they can go, we do try to prioritize them staying in Bucks County, just because that is where we know we have the most resources. We're connected with the most resources to be able to provide other supports. But they can also relocate into Montgomery County or Philadelphia, as long as it's a distance that the case manager is able to travel to still meet with them for ongoing support. The rentals that are being considered have to fall under a rent reasonableness, which basically just means the other units that are similar size in this similar area would be about the same price. And that's to kind of be in compliance with fair housing and make sure that, you know, landlords aren't exploiting our clients because they're having some assistance and then they end up in higher paying units. After they're in their own unit, we continue to meet with them for case management at least once a month, but depending on need, it sometimes is weekly, could be bi-weekly, kind of depending on how much support or other goals they have that they're working through. And ultimately, at the end of the rapid rehousing program, their goal is self-sufficiency, safety, and stability. And so that's always kind of what all of our programs we want to work towards, is getting them beyond crisis, recreating a safe space for them and feeling like they're stable enough to move forward on their own. Recently, our rapid rehousing manager put together and launched these educational modules through a platform called Teachable. And so the focus of this is to really help our folks become ready to be a prepared renter, to think about how to navigate through working with a landlord. For a lot of our folks, they may not have lived on their own before, they may not have to have navigated some of these things before. And so this is aimed at helping to give some additional resources and information. And then kind of once they're housed and learning how to navigate with a landlord, it moves more on to building budgets and how can they plan more with their money, where can they increase spending. So kind of as they move on through the program, it builds deeper into what next steps they might be looking to accomplish before being completely on their own and self-sufficient. Any questions generally about rapid rehousing? Okay, I'm going to take the silence as a no, and we'll kind of keep moving on. Also within the rapid rehousing bucket is this new position that we've recently received funding for, which is the domestic violence intake specialist. So this person is really supposed to focus on bridging the gap between homelessness and survivors of domestic violence that we have in our county. And so what I mean by that is, I referenced earlier, there's the housing link, which is the hub for all of the housing resources. Anybody who's calling into that system and says that they have experienced domestic violence at some point gets kind of bumped out to us. The gap that we're often working with is that when we talk more about our shelter, we'll go into more details, but our shelter is really focused on those who are at imminent risk. So there has to be a safety risk at the moment that they're calling for shelter in order to be eligible for our shelter. But we also know that domestic violence is a very big reason for homelessness. And so there are a number of folks who are either couch surfing, street homeless, staying in a hotel, maybe haven't had a stable place for a while because of domestic violence, but there's no longer any current safety risk because of the domestic violence. And so they find themselves in this weird gap of, yes, they're a survivor of domestic violence, but there's not this imminent risk. So they're not eligible for our shelter, but the housing system kicks them out to us anyway. So the purpose of this position is to help with that. It's to help provide case management for those people who fall into that bucket. There are some limited funds that we can use to either help with replacing documentation if they don't have it, help with a down payment or deposit for moving into a unit, to really try to focus on making sure those families have support as well. And then additionally connecting them with our other services like counseling or victim response if they have some sort of need to, if they're still going through a court process or they're wanting to file a protection order or something like that. So they are kind of one branch, and then the other is our shelter. Our shelter is in a confidential and secure location. We typically don't disclose the location until you're kind of fully through training and coming in for a practicum. Has anyone talked to you all about a practicum yet? Do you know you have to do a 5-hour practicum? Okay, so when you get there, this is kind of where you'll start your 5-hour practicums in the shelter, shadowing hotline and working on some hotline calls. So that's at the point where we'll start to introduce you to shelter and do some tours there. But in general, it is 7 bedrooms, so it is smaller than I think most people tend to think it is. And it is not, you know, when you hear shelter, you think big open room with cots. That is not the setup that we have. We have much more autonomy and privacy in our building in terms of each family has their own bedroom, locking door, has their privacy in their space. And then the rest of the area is like a shared community living space. So they're sharing, you know, kitchen, living, bathroom, backyard sort of areas. Also on site at the shelter is a full pantry in their basement, which includes all like shelf-stable foods, dried goods, canned goods, any kind of basic toiletry they might need. We have kind of all the basic needs if you're coming in with nothing. So some basic clothing, socks, underwear, pajamas, basic kids' school supplies, linens, towels, just trying our very best to make sure we're meeting the needs of anybody who's coming in. There's also a fence in backyard for the kiddos to go outside and play. And sometimes we can have anywhere from, you know, 1 or 2 kids up to 15 or 16 kids staying in the house at any time. Lastly, it is staffed 24/7. So those folks that I referenced their names earlier, they are staffing on shifts, nights, weekends, holidays, inclement weather, any sort of scenario, and they're still kind of reporting into work and making sure that they're there for the families and for the hotline. All right, so once they arrive at shelter, our purpose is to create a safe environment. We recognize that they're coming from spaces that are not safe. They're spaces where they've not often had the ability to make their own choices or have any sort of control over what it is that their decisions are. And so we work really hard to create a space that we refer to as a no-rules shelter, in terms of we are always trying to work with clients on what works best for them. The only sort of provisions that we're putting in place are around maintaining safety. And so what that would look like is we expect for a safe and supportive environment. And so we do not allow physical or verbal violence. But in general, it's a pretty, this is their home, this is where they live. We want them to feel that this is their home and this is where they live. So there's not a lot of strict rules around like when they can use the kitchen or the bathrooms or any of those sorts of things. Food and clothing, again, we try to meet all the basic necessities when they come in, and then continue to try to meet as many basic necessities as we can. We want any sort of income that they're able to obtain while they're in our safe house to be able to save and focus on for when they leave and are kind of more on their own. And so while they're with us, we want to take care of as many needs as we possibly can to better set them up for success when they leave. They meet for case management 1 to 2 times a week. They're creating goal plans there that are identified by the specific survivor who's in there. And so they look different for each participant that comes through the program. The 2 kind of main goals that are on almost everybody's are housing and income, because that's often something that everybody is working towards since the shelter is a short-term program. And then last, we're also providing any appropriate referrals that they might need for if they're needing additional mental health services, if they maybe need to apply for cash assistance, any sort of those pieces where they might need some support walking through, getting set up with those, we can provide support there as well. So like I mentioned, case management is twice a week. The first one is usually kind of a deep check-in, deep conversation of where they are at everything, setting up a plan for the week, what they plan to accomplish. The second one is more of a check-in on what they were able to do based on what they outlined earlier in the week. This allows us to kind of be more aware of what it is that they're working on so we can be providing the best levels of support for them. Also helps to keep clients organized when they're in crisis and navigating a lot of moving pieces at once. Having this, set aside time where they can sit with a trained professional and kind of work through what they're working on is helpful. They all receive case management binders, which includes a lot like the general resources at large. So they don't have to come to us for specific resources. They have the ability to have autonomy to kind of find them on their own and be able to access those whenever they need to. We also include budgeting worksheets and referrals to credit counseling so that we can work on if they have income, maybe how they can better spread their resources, or thinking about where they need to increase, what they are able to afford, what they can't, working through those sorts of scenarios. And then while they're with us, it's very flexible in how long they are staying with us. It can be anywhere from a couple of days up until we've had folks close to 8 or 9 months, just because of the number of barriers they were working through. It's meant to be very flexible based on the client's need. And so as long as they are working towards their goals, attending case management, there's no safety concerns with them remaining in this shelter, we continue to kind of work with them until their housing issue is resolved. Like I mentioned earlier, most of our folks do end up exiting into our rapid rehousing program. Again, affordable housing is not very plentiful in the area, and so it takes time for folks to be able to find things, and most of the time they cannot afford them on their own. And that's no different than kind of the rest of us are in this position where it's very difficult to live as a single head of household anymore without additional income. And so we've found the best way to be able to support folks is through this rapid rehousing program. If they are a little bit more independent, we also have a relocation program, which is much smaller amount of financial assistance. It's often just covering like a security deposit or something if they're able to continue to maintain on their own. It could also mean if they have family they can stay with across the country, we can help pay for flights to get them out there and get them situated. Or if they end up that they can return to their home because their partner's not there anymore, we can help with security cameras and lock changes to make their previous living situation more safe for them once the offender is out. Other community programs would be kind of other housing programs that are a little bit more supportive than Rapid would be, which is primarily like a transitional housing or supportive housing program. Those are a little like a step behind Rapid, where the lease is not in their name. They're living in a unit that's maintained by an agency. They're not paying towards the rent at all. It's just a longer term, usually 6 to 12 months, where they're able to keep working on their goals and increasing income so that they can then, usually the next step after that would be going into a Rapid program and then kind of on their own. So it's a tiered approach. The challenge with those is they're not nearly enough units for the amount of need. And so we find we often have to work with our folks in rapid rehousing, even though they might have a higher level of need just out of availability. So our folks often need longer term rapid rehousing, and it's not uncommon for them to go past that 12-month mark. That is kind of the standard. In terms of employment, we often have lists of things that are open locally that are maybe within walking distance or on a bus route so that they could find some ways to earn some income, referrals to CareerLink, help with resume building, all of those sorts of things we can support with on staff. And then replacing documents. A lot of our folks that come in did not really have the time or thought to be able to make sure they have birth certificates and driver's licenses and state IDs for them, everybody in their household. And so it does often mean applying to replace these documents, which often kind of has to be the first step, because a number of these other things that you're working on, you would need to have your documentation in order to really make progress in terms of finding employment or housing. Questions about kind of how shelter is set up? Okay. All right, so we will move on to hotline a little bit here. Like I said, the hotline is based out of our safe house, so it rings in that front office with the staff who are kind of navigating both hotline, what the shelter residents need, maybe donations that are showing up. So they have a very multifaceted job, and that's why we definitely appreciate volunteer support in helping with the hotline so that our CAs are able to better focus on the client needs. We have another person in that's able to better focus on hotline needs, because sometimes what can happen is if they're multitasking and balancing several lines at a time, they'll have to put people on hold and like kind of bounce back and forth between calls, which is not the experience we want somebody to have if they're calling in and talking about something they're experiencing maybe for the first time. So the help of all of you is definitely greatly appreciated in making sure that our survivors are well supported. The biggest thing with hotline is listening and giving options. Those are kind of the two main tiers of what we're doing there. And those options can look like different ways to safety plan. They can look like different resources to help get them out of their situation. Sometimes they want to stay where they are. They just want to figure out how to make it safer. And so it's talking through those things with our clients. It's connecting them both with a women's place services and any other community services that they might need some support with. And then they're also evaluating shelter requests on the hotline as well and determining who to bring into our safe house when we have availability. The hotline kind of brings in calls from all over. It's not just folks who have experienced domestic violence that are calling in. Sometimes it's family or friends that have a family or friend member that they are concerned about. They want to talk about resources, figure out how they can help, that call in. Sometimes people who maybe aren't quite ready to admit that they're in a domestic violence relationship, but just want to talk to somebody without judgment, without it really going anywhere else, just someone to talk to. Sometimes other social service providers or police or nurses might be calling in on behalf of somebody they're working with to provide a referral. And then sometimes it's donations. They want to know if they can donate this. They want to know how they can get involved. So it really is a little bit of everything under the sun that you're getting in through the hotline. In general, we answer usually between 2,000 and 2,500 calls a year through our hotline that are specific to domestic violence callers. It's much closer to about 5,000 calls in total when you accommodate for all these other donation calls, or we often get a lot of homelessness without domestic violence calls because they hear a name and they think if they're a woman, then they can come to our shelter and don't quite recognize the we're here for domestic violence. I kind of jumped ahead, but some of the other calls we get are, again, folks who are homeless looking for shelter, stalking, and that could be either by a partner, a previous partner, or a stranger. We'll get phone calls about that as well. Donations. Our former clients or current clients that are out in the community are eligible to call back to pick up pantry items. So sometimes we're getting calls from folks in the community that have used our services requesting a pickup that the shelter advocates will also kind of assemble and put together. Questions around protection from abuse orders, which you'll hear a lot more about from Tommy when she joins you again tomorrow. Custody violations, criminal charges because there was an incident and police were out. All of those sorts of calls are calls that come into our hotline. And then sometimes we do get calls about sexual assault. Those are, unless there's a domestic violence component, those are referred over to our community partner, NOVA, which is the Network of Victim Assistance. Okay, in terms of communicating with folks on the hotline, the biggest thing, again, is active listening. Folks that are calling in sometimes may have never told anybody what they're experiencing before, have been met with resistance for what they're experiencing or disbelief. And so what's most important is that we're listening and not judging, and kind of affirming and validating what it is that they're sharing with us. Open-ended questions are important because they help the client see that we're not just like looking for yes or no answers to fill out a form. We're here to listen and understand what's happening and figure out the best way that we can support them. Sometimes it's in terms of clarifying, it might be talking about what domestic violence is. And so I think all too often we get calls saying, well, he's verbally or mentally not kind to me, but that's not really abuse. You have more like important things to deal with. And so it's normalizing that is still abuse. There's more than one type of abuse. Not all domestic violence relationships include physical abuse. And so it's clarifying and providing information in that way. Sometimes silence is perfectly fine. You don't need to fill the air if they just need a moment to reflect or think about whatever it is they want to go next. And then summarizing back helps them to know that you've heard them, you understand them, you're listening, and that you really are an active participant in this conversation. Okay, some general info about our hotline. We almost always answer with hello, how can I help you? We do not identify that this is a woman's place from the get-go of the call. And that's basically because sometimes we get abusive partners who are phishing. They're calling numbers back, seeing who it is, trying to figure out who their partner's calling. Could they Google the hotline and find us? Sure, but we're not going to make it any easier for them. So we always answer with hello, how can I help you? The biggest things we want to talk about kind of right off the bat is confidentiality and mandated reporting, which Tommy, I'm sure, spent lots and lots of time talking with you all about. But we want to make sure that they have all of the information of what they can share with us that will not go anywhere, and what they would share with us that might have to go somewhere. And really understanding that the only place that is if they're disclosing any sort of child abuse. That is enough to break the confidentiality privilege. Again, we're kind of serving as a safe place for them. They may not have talked to many folks about what they've been experiencing before. We're giving them time to talk. Part of being in an abusive relationship, it can be very isolating, and that friends and family sometimes don't want to hear it anymore. Like, they've heard it, they've not seen change, they don't want to be involved anymore. And so it's important for us to always give them that time to talk and reflect on what's going on without judgment. Conflicts are a challenge. So conflicts, we can only serve one party, and what happens more often than we'd like to think is that both parties will call in claiming that the other party is abusive. And so we are constantly checking for anybody who's calling in, who's getting referred into our services, to make sure that they are not conflicted out in our system. This can be challenging if sometimes the second person that calls, you're starting to feel like that really is the survivor, and then you're trying to work through with other staff if we need to dismiss the other one and roll this one. But conflicts are something that are really important to check for that reason, so that we're not serving both parties. And then referrals. There's a lot of referrals between either internally to our own programs or externally to others outside of a woman's place. Okay, so for considering shelter, I'm going to go back for a moment. In your binders, do you have your binders with you all? You do? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to reshare some of the binder pages so we can go through some of the handouts. I want to start with the hotline intake form, just to kind of walk through the information we're looking for that we need to gather, since all of you will have to at some point, once we get through training, spend some time on our hotline. So I want to go over intake a little bit. Okay, so this page is the form you would use. It's on page 45 if you have yours printed and want to look along that way. It's on page 45 in your direct service training binder. This is what we go through with anybody who's calling in and is expressing that they have been impacted by domestic violence. So in other words, if somebody's like, hey, I want to donate my old clothes, where do I go? You would not fill out this form. This is solely for if there is any disclosure of domestic violence. So I know it looks like a lot of information that we're kind of gathering from folks. A lot of this is important, again, for that conflict check and making sure that we're not serving both parties. Super important under safe telephone number is asking if it's safe to call back and if it's safe to leave a message and any sort of specific instructions. Specifically, if they're being monitored by their partner, they might have specifics around you can only call back during these times. Or if you leave a voicemail, please leave it generic, like this is your friend from whatever. And so we want to make sure we're having those questions. We'd never want to get in a circumstance where we are returning phone calls and creating an unsafe environment for the people who are reaching out for help. So super important to ask those questions. Name, first and last, and date of birth are required if we're going to do any sort of internal referrals. And again, that's for helping with conflict. If somebody wants to call, remain anonymous, and just talk, that's totally fine. But if they're wanting to get referred into shelter or counseling or victim response, civil legal representation, children's advocacy, anything that's going to bring them into the agency, we do have to get last date of birth for them. Also important to get town and zip code. For some of our programs, we only serve Bucks County, so we would need to make sure that they were eligible for our services. And so those are specifically shelter we will take from anywhere. If you're a survivor and your safety is at risk and you have no other resources, doesn't matter where you're coming from, you would be considered for shelter. But some of our other ones, like our victim response team, they really only know the criminal justice system in Bucks County, or they know the PFA process in Bucks County. And so they're really only providing support to people who either live in Bucks County or the crime that happened, where there's charges associated, happened in Bucks County. With counseling, they primarily focus on Bucks County clients, but if there are specifics where, like occasionally we might get somebody who is calling from Hatboro, they're looking for in-person counseling and it's way more convenient for them to get to our Doylestown office than it might be to go to Lansdale for Montgomery County services. So if there's some specific circumstance that makes it better for the client, we will take from out of county, but generally we focus specifically on Bucks County residents. Offender's name, also, if they're going into our services, we need to have the offender's name and date of birth. And again, that's so that we can check to make sure there's not a conflict there. These are usually the questions that folks do not want to ask while they're in the conversation. These are more demographics. They're more for tracking for us in terms of getting an idea of what's happening in our community and then allowing us to go after funding that might specifically meet a need that's happening in our community. And so often what a lot of folks will do for this specific section is wait until the end of the conversation, and then as things are resolved, the caller has gotten everything they needed, end it with, would you mind if I ask you some statistical or demographical questions, and get this information there. Other times, just depending on the conversation, you might pick up on some of these things throughout the conversation because they might reference my husband or we're separated, or so. The more familiar you get with the form, the more often you're talking on the phone, you might just start to pick up on some of these things that they're talking and be able to check off what's going on there. For kids, this section is really only important if either they're requesting shelter, because we need to make sure we have a room size available that would fit the need of the family size, or if they're requesting children's advocacy services, it would be important to get the kiddos' names and date of birth so that we can send that referral. Otherwise, you don't quite need to get this if they're just calling for a PFA or just calling for counseling and there's not really any need for the kiddos. These are important to ask to see if maybe they do need to be connected to our victim response team. I think sometimes, folks call for a very specific reason and may not realize all of the other services that we can provide. And so those questions would be important so that if there was police contact and there are charges filed, they may not know that we have a team that can walk them through that process and be there at court with them and provide information. So we'd want to gather that information to be able to support them as well. This form just needs to be updated. For a couple of years, we had some funding for human trafficking. So this section was added when we were working more with human trafficking victims. At this point, though, we do not work with trafficking victims alone. If it's domestic violence and trafficking, we'd still support them, but folks who are experiencing human trafficking but no domestic violence component, we're going to refer over to our partners, NOVA. This says for AW use only, just because sometimes when our staff are at court with folks, they might give them this form if they're picking them up to fill out the front on their own rather than sitting down and asking the questions. So that's kind of the only reason there's an indicator there. This gives you an idea of everything we provide internally. And so you're going to check off wherever they're being referred to. Again, human trafficking, we do not have anymore. A couple other things to note: our first response and legal advocacy teams have merged. And so our first response used to do all of the criminal court accompaniment and information. Our legal advocacy team did all of the protection from abuse order accompaniment and information. But what we found is there was often so much overlap between the folks who are filing protection orders and the folks who are experiencing going through the criminal justice system that we decided to merge them so that survivors can have one advocate through the whole process with them rather than having to have two separate advocates in two separate programs. CLR is civil legal representation. We have one lone attorney who kind of provides all of the services for as many people as she can for us. She primarily focuses on family law and some specifically around custody. She will also go to PFA court with some of our folks as well every week. This is a place where there's a much larger need in the community. There are so many folks in need of legal representation and legal advice. And with domestic violence around custody and support and divorce, it's not a quick fix. It's often years and years of going through the court process. And so there's a really big need here. But Lauren, our attorney, does the best she can with what she has. Shelter we talked about already. Medical advocacy would be like if a nurse was calling because they had a patient in that disclosed domestic violence and they wanted to connect with a domestic violence agency, we would check off that. And then RISE is redefining independence, strength, and empowerment. That is kind of a post-crisis program. So it's for folks who have been impacted by domestic violence. They've made it through their crisis and now they're still trying to figure out next steps. And so this is kind of that post-crisis phase type of program. And then not on here is our trauma therapy, which I'm sure Sarah talked a whole lot about last night. And so that is also kind of often a post-crisis sort of service. We have our crisis counselors who are dealing with the empowerment counseling and safety planning and crisis counseling. And then kind of once things are more stabilized, they will move over if they're needing additional support into this trauma therapy lens to continue to work on any traumas they've experienced in their lives. So not typically a referral straight from hotline because most of the folks we're getting from hotline are still in that crisis moment. But occasionally we might have folks call in who are past the crisis, dealing with some history of trauma, and we might refer them right to therapy from there. And then these are the kind of most common external referrals that we're referring out to, and you just would kind of tick through who went where. NOVA, we kind of talked about already. They're the network of victim assistance, so they're supporting victims of sexual assault and other crimes. Public assistance would be like the county assistance office in terms of getting set up with food stamps or medical assistance, those sorts of things. Legal aid is often our go-to if it's a conflict looking for legal support with a PFA. Rather than referring them to our team to support, we will often send them to legal aid. Housing is that housing link that I talked about earlier as being kind of the hub for all housing resources in the county. And district attorney, we honestly don't refer to that often, so I'm not super sure why we still have that there. Housing status is a little important in terms of if they're calling for shelter. And then there's a section here for whether or not they were approved and the room's on hold or if we had to refer out. And then these are kind of just reminders of things you want to be chatting about in most of your phone calls. You definitely want to talk about the services we have, safety planning with whatever's going on, talk about domestic violence information. Confidentiality, you're going to again want to talk about in every call. The direct service packet is really something that's only provided in person when they're coming into services. So that's more likely going to be if volunteers or staff are meeting somebody in court, they would provide them this packet. It goes through in writing all of our services. It talks about victim rights. It talks about other options they might have as a victim. And then the lethality assessment completed, that is specifically for law enforcement. That's a we will go over the tool in a little while, but that is meant to assess a situation to see how high risk they might be for lethality after police are called out to an incident. And then comments. So what's super important about the comments that we are writing down is that they are very brief. And so we never want to put any judgment in our comments or opinions in the comments. We don't even want to put a whole lot of details about what's occurring in the comments. What the purpose of the comments is mostly for what did they call about, what did we do, and what services did we refer them to. As Tommy kind of talked about, we do have absolute privilege for domestic violence, but we are always operating from the lens of what if we did get subpoenaed for our records. We do not want anything in there that's not accurate, that's judgmental, or that would negatively impact our clients. And so we are always documenting from that lens. And so if someone were to kind of call in, your notes would look something like called requesting counseling, discussed current relationship and ongoing abuse, made referrals to community counseling, victim response, and whatever else. So they're pretty short. Any questions about this phone call form or about documentation or how to be taking notes on the hotline?
Well, I'm just wondering in general, like, I know you can't say specifically, but if someone is calling for shelter and you're the first contact, like how long would it take them to be able to go to get the shelter, like the emergency shelter, I guess?
Like how long is the conversation that you're like kind of going through with them, or like?
Is it like it takes several days, or if they're in emergency, they can go within a day, or just a general?
Yeah, so in general, the shelter is based off of, like I said, imminent risk. And so when somebody's calling for shelter, we're going through a housing assessment and a risk assessment. If they are at imminent risk and we have availability, then we're approving them right in that moment. They have 24 hours to get to us. So it is pretty immediate. Because otherwise what we don't do is we don't really say, oh, we're going to have an opening in like a week, so call us back in a week and we'll get you in then, because again, we're talking about people who are calling who are having safety risks in this moment. And so we don't operate on wait list. We don't give like a large period of time before they can come in. There's a 24-hour hold period. We do ask that they try to arrange their own transportation if they have it. If they don't, we will provide like a Lyft or an Uber to get them to us. And then they would just, if for some reason they couldn't make it in 24 hours, they would just need to be in contact with us on why. It wouldn't be like a 24 hours and 1 minute, we're done. As long as they're staying in contact and are kind of like, I have to work or I need to plan when he's out of the house. Like if we're building safety plans in that way, then we can go a little beyond the 24 hours.
Jen, just to follow up on that, how often is the shelter fully occupied?
Almost always.
So how is that conveyed? Like that, how does that work?
Yeah. Typically when somebody exits, the room is refilled within a day or two. So it's the next person that's calling in at imminent risk that we're bringing in. If there is somebody who is at imminent risk, we don't have room, we can offer to call with them to other shelters to try to get them in another domestic violence shelter, or just provide the numbers for them. Often people prefer that option. Occasionally, if we have the funding to do so, we can do a short-term hotel stay. And that most often we would do if we knew internally, I have this family that's exiting in a week. I have this person calling in who has a safety risk. We have some hotel funding. Let's put them in a hotel for a week and then bring them into shelter as soon as this other person exits. So sometimes we can navigate things like that. But because hotels, like, they are so expensive and it's not the most efficient way to be drawing down funds, it wouldn't be a long-term solution. There would have to be a plan for how we might get them somewhere else within, a week or so. But it is hard, like I said, we have 7 rooms. And so with often being full and knowing that domestic violence impacts 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, like it's a major community issue, and only having such limited space is difficult. And that's partially why we're pretty strict on who we bring in terms of not being able to support folks who are homeless due to domestic violence, where they've been couch hopping for a while, because at least they're safe, and we need to focus our energy in the ones that aren't safe at the moment.
Understood. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions about the intake form?
I have a question. Do you guys also assess for like the caller or the client's safety in terms of like suicidality, that type of thing, or is it more just safety from the abuser?
Usually safety from the abuser. That's not to say we wouldn't assess for where there were concerns about suicidal, but it would be more of if that's where the conversation was led. So it's not a standard that we're talking about with everyone, but if we're having a conversation and they're mentioning thoughts that are starting to make us believe that there might be some suicidal ideation, we'll kind of dig into it then. There's a really great training called QPR, if anybody has taken it. It's question, persuade, refer, that is really meant to assess for folks who are suicidal and figure out the best way to support them in the moment. So most of our staff have taken that training. I always recommend that training to anybody who's going to be on the hotline, because we are not mental health professionals, so we don't really want to cross that boundary, but we do want to assess where we can and connect with resources where we can. So I mentioned the LAP, and again, Tommy will do a lot more on criminal, but I just wanted to kind of briefly go over this. The lethality assessment is based off of Jackie Campbell's danger assessment. So these are the list of questions that there are. And so these are meant to kind of assess the level of lethality that somebody might be in. On the actual LAP form, the first 2 questions are kind of marked as high risk. Having guns in the home where there's domestic violence increases the risk of lethality by 500%. And so somebody in a domestic violence relationship where there are guns in the home is a really big red flag for safety. The other really big red flag for safety is, where is it? Don't know why my brain's not seeing at the moment, but strangulation is one of the biggest risks in terms of that being a near fatality or highest risk for it turning into a fatality. Strangulation is one of those ones that's really, really a red flag when we're talking with folks. There it is, number 10. The other thing that we're kind of assessing for specifically around strangulation is there might not always be physical marks, but there's so much damage that can be done to your brain from a strangulation and cutting off oxygen that we're really encouraging folks to seek out medical treatment after a strangulation so they can get the right tests done to make sure that there's no sort of damage that might cause an issue days down the road. So this is typically what we'll get something similar to this from law enforcement, and it'll kind of mark them if they're a high risk for lethality, still at risk, or there's an option for them to say like they're not really scoring as high risk, but something like feels like they are. And so there's an option for the officer to kind of fill in a section like that as well. And then while they're still on the scene, the officer will call in with the survivor so that we can connect immediately with the survivor and get them connected with services. The other assessment that we use for risk is this risk assessment. So this one was created by Bucks County. It was a joint mission between a number of victim service providers in the county. So it included Nova and A Woman's Place, district attorney's office, police departments. After there was a string of fatalities in Bucks County, they wanted to really assess what was happening in the county and determine if there are certain risk factors that put survivors at more risk of fatality. And so after doing some research into the fatalities that had occurred, they came up with this tool. You'll see a lot of these questions are very similar to the other risk assessment that I had showed you previously from Jackie Campbell. The biggest difference is The Jackie Campbell risk assessment is evidence-based. This tool is not. This is a tool that was just created in county and was never made evidence-based, which is why we tend to use this more in-house when we're assessing for shelter, and then the police tend to use the other risk assessment more often. So you'll see up here that if a victim answers yes to any 2 questions, that they may be at an increased risk for lethality and physical injury. So that's 2. And I can tell you, when we go over this with shelter, people calling in for shelter, the average number of yeses that we have are 8 or 9. And that's not to say that that's a rule. They must hit 8 or 9 before they're coming into shelter. It's just something that we've noticed over the years as we're talking with folks and assessing, is that there tends to be a much higher number of yeses for those that are coming into shelter. Questions on either risk assessment tool? Okay, just going to do a quick make sure there's not any other forms that I wanted to go over before we go back to the PowerPoint. No. Okay. All right, let's switch back. Okay, so we kind of talked about a number of these things already. I do have a tendency to get ahead of myself, and then I need to kind of go backwards and stick more to the PowerPoint. So we talked about the risk assessment. We talked about imminent risk and kind of determining that by the answers of the risk assessment. Alternative accommodations is going to be that where I talked about either calling with them to other shelters, if we have money for hotel, maybe providing a short time hotel stay, those sorts of things. Other times it might be really kind of digging through, are there any friends and family? Is there anyone else that might be a safe place even temporarily while we're working on next steps? And so it's exploring all of those options. In general, we're always exploring those options with folks calling for shelter, just because, one, with the space being limited, we want to make sure we're taking the folks who have no other options for safe housing. And 2, like, as much as we try to create a very trauma-informed space, living in a shelter and community living with other families who have been through all sorts of different trauma is not an easy experience. There is some camaraderie and feeling of I'm with people who understand and who have been through similar things, but in general, it can be a very, very stressful time. And so if there is somebody who's a good support that you can stay with, that's most likely going to be a better outcome in that scenario than coming into a shelter. For structure and expectations, we talked a bit about that earlier. We are considered no rules, and so we are not providing a lot of restrictions around what they can and can't do. Instead, we are having conversations about keeping a safe space. We're having conversations about what their needs are and how we can help, how we can't help. Making every situation really pretty unique. It's almost always we're having a conversation before making a decision, and that can be a little bit frustrating for folks who prefer the outcome of, if this happens, then this is the result. That's not typically the way it works in shelter, because we're considering all possible solutions. Confidentiality is very important for shelter, making sure that folks know that are coming in, that they can't let other folks know where they're going, that they can't have visitors to and from the shelter, that we have to maintain a safe space without disclosing locations. And then we also talk about safety planning. And so some of that can look like, I can't leave right now because they're home. I need to wait for them to go to work, and then I need to grab my documents. And so kind of planning through the best route on how to leave. Sometimes it looks like the caller disclosed child abuse to us. We have to make a report, and now the caller is terrified because when children and youth shows up, the abuser it's going to become a very unsafe space when the abuser finds out what's happened. And so sometimes it's making sure we're getting them in quickly if we know that there's going to be children and youth that are going to escalate a situation with the abuser. Sometimes it looks like Did you turn off your location settings? Do you know, does he track you? Does he follow you? Do we need to look at the car, see if there's devices in there? And so it's talking through kind of all of those pieces so that when they're leaving, we're minimizing risk of any danger following them. All right, so talking a bit more about safety planning, this is something that's done often, frequently in all areas of the agency. It's something we're doing at hotline level, and then you're also doing with your counselor or your victim response advocate. And the reason for that is, one, it can be constantly evolving. Situations change, and the same plan that you had before might not work anymore. And two, because when you're in a moment of crisis, you're not going to remember the plan you made that one time and never really gave any further thought to. And so it's important to keep having these conversations repeatedly. Big thing with safety planning is it's built to the person, and so everybody's safety plan is going to look unique to them. There are some general points that you can make with most folks in terms of keeping a tank of gas if you have a car, keeping a go bag if you have a way to do so, making sure your documents are stored if you can in your go bag. Staying out of places with hard surfaces if you can feel an argument coming on, because most of these circumstances, the survivors are the experts in their life. They know when something's about to happen. They've lived it for a long time. They've navigated it for a long time. And so kind of really working with them to build that plan for around when they know that something's coming. Those are kind of some general ones, keeping car facing the street. The asking help from a trusted friend or neighbor, or teaching kids to call 911 when age appropriate, is really dependent on the person. There are a lot of folks that we work with that say, my kids have no idea about what's going on. I do not want them involved. I am not going to get them involved at all. And that's fine. And then the same can be true for friends or neighbors. Some people don't want other people to know what's going on. Other times they can be a part of the safety plan. And then the same with safety at work, kind of hit or miss. It depends on what they feel comfortable with, what they feel like their employers would be able to support with or not support with. Okay, some other kind of quick tips is changing routines, especially for those who like to follow or track, taking different routes to work, taking different routes to friends or family houses. Those sorts of things help to create more safety. If they have the option to have another safe place to stay, already knowing that, maybe knowing where the hotels are semi near you, and so knowing where you might go if you need to leave late at night. Secret phones, sometimes we're able to help with purchasing track phones or minute phones for folks, so that they have a more private way to be able to talk with caseworkers or make plans. PFAs are a really big piece often of safety planning. And then our counseling, once they're coming into counseling, safety planning is kind of something they're going to talk about regularly and repeatedly through the process. Questions about safety planning? Okay, questions about hotline, shelter, rapid, any of the above?
This isn't a question, it's more a comment of just how this is heavy stuff, how much is really involved in all of this. It's pretty amazing the help that can be provided. So it's heavy, but it shows how important it is. So it's good to see.
And I think a lot of times what folks are most fearful of when they come onto the hotline is, I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to say the wrong thing, or something is going to be wildly happening in the background. I'm not going to know what to do, those sorts of fears. And I can say most of the time, just listening and allowing them to kind of speak what they've experienced is often more than enough. And so even being able to do that, if you're not sure what else to say, you're not sure what resources to give them, as long as you're present and listening and not judging, that is more than they might have experienced anywhere else. And so that's still enough. There's also a hold button. When you're doing your practicum, you're not alone. There's a staff member. If at any point it's either too heavy, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not sure what resources are available, you can always ask the person to, put them on hold for a minute, gather more information, pass off the phone call if it's too much. Those sorts of things would be options as well. Okay, so then if there's no other questions, we're going to take a couple minutes to talk through some like scenarios. Like I said, we're not actually going to break into groups and role play. We'll just kind of read and then discuss. And then there are 2 video role plays with some previous shelter staff that we'll watch and then discuss that as well. So let me switch over to our role plays. I apologize. I am much more comfortable in person than like navigating between like different screens and technology. So thank you for your patience as I'm switching things. Okay, so this you'll find in page 48 of your direct service training packet. So I'll go ahead, I'll read the little blurb, and then we'll just kind of discuss together how you might support the person. So number 1, a woman calls to tell you that her friend just confided in her that her husband, a good provider, beats her regularly. The caller asks about counseling services for her friend and how to convince her friend to seek help. The woman expresses her disbelief that an attractive, intelligent woman would tolerate such a treatment. What are thoughts on how you might kind of respond to this woman, how you might kind of talk through this call?
I mean, does the organization actually, when somebody else calls, is that an okay thing? Like if I was calling for my friend, like I know I personally would encourage my friend to call. So how does the organization handle when other people, that's what I need to know, how they handle when other people call for someone.
Sure. So we do get calls from significant others semi-regularly. They can certainly call and ask for information about our services. They can call and ask for ways they might be able to support their friend or family member. What we can't do is if somebody calls and says, this person really needs your services, can you call them and get them involved? That we cannot do. Services are voluntary. The person who is seeking the services has to be the one that actually reaches out and requests them.
So if the woman's expressing her disbelief, I mean, that's not really something we should address. I mean, that's her opinion about the situation, doesn't mean it's not happening, correct?
You could do some like general domestic violence 101 sort of stuff in terms of like domestic violence impacts everybody. It doesn't discriminate based on like, so you can that general support with her. You could also kind of talk through like the most important thing for people who are experiencing domestic violence is to have somebody who's not past, like who is a support for them, who's there for them, who's providing empathy and understanding for them. So you can have those sorts of conversations.
I might also like empathize that it's hard to see your friend go through this. I mean, you never know. Maybe she's really not calling in about her friend. Maybe it's something that hits home with her too. Like you don't know when someone's on the other end of the line. So just being empathetic to her and just making it a safe space, even though it's not necessarily about her.
Mm-hmm. That's very true as well. Sometimes people might call in and say that they have a friend when it's really themselves that they're talking about and not feeling comfortable. Any other thoughts with that specific scenario? And then I kind of already mentioned, but we cannot convince her friend to seek help. We cannot enroll her in services, but we can certainly talk with the friend on how they can get connected with us and the ways we can help. We can direct them to the website. You can see all of our services there, those sorts of things we could do. Okay, number 2. A man, a former client, has called to talk about his feelings of loneliness. He has divorced his husband and has established a life of his own. He's had a bad week and needs someone to talk to. He remembers how helpful your group was when you first left his husband.
I think as you mentioned, like you can be someone that's just there to listen to them and um, to be empathetic and to just hear them out. And this person mentioned they're lonely and they might not have a single other person to talk to about it.
Yep, and that's, I mean, fairly common that we get folks calling just for emotional support. It's interesting, like you kind of know like the time of day when these calls happen. And so typically during business hours, we're getting most of I need counseling, I want to file a PFA, like those sorts of calls are happening during the business hours. The emotional support calls are more often happening on like our 4 to 12 shift. Like as things are quieting down for the day, we're getting more of these emotional support calls. And sometimes, I've been on the hotline for up to 2 hours with one person providing just emotional support for that time. And then overnight is usually pretty minimal, but you might get the occasional emotional support person who's just kind of up and can't sleep. You could also maybe make some referrals if he wanted to get back involved in the support group, if that felt appropriate. That could be an option to kind of get him reconnected if he needed it. Any other thoughts with that scenario?
I have a question. So in cases where clients wants to be on the phone for like 2 hours to receive emotional support, like during that time, are there enough staff members to accommodate other clients who are calling? Like, wouldn't that affect like the manpower of the facility to help others?
It could. There is typically like only one person on at a time. So it's typically one person manning the phone and dealing and like working with the residents. Nights can be a little bit quieter, and so it might not if they're sitting and talking with one person for a little while. Also, kind of our regular emotional support callers know that we have to put them on hold. And some of them will even say like, I can hear the phone ringing, I'm going to let you go. And so you do sometimes have to put them on hold or kind of jump back and forth. And sometimes you do kind of have to redirect and kind of end the conversation at a certain point because going past 2 hours can start to get a little maybe not so useful anymore at some point. All right, number 3. The wife of a wealthy lawyer calls, saying that her husband abuses her, but that no one knows this because he hurts her in ways that will not leave marks. As you start to give her some options, such as shelter or a PFA, she has a reason not to do each. She can't leave her house, the kids can't miss school, etc. She is a yes but caller. How might you support this person?
I think I'd kind of just meet her where she's at and empathize. Like, yeah, I imagine that must be hard. You can't leave the house. You know what I mean? We're not going to push her to do something she's not. Clearly, she's giving the excuses or whatever the reasons because she might not be ready. So just kind of as uncomfortable as that might be, refrain from saying, "Well, you need to do it anyway," and just meet her where she is.
Yeah, that's great.
I think, yeah, I think if she's got a yes but answer for a lot of things, I might start asking, like, what do you think it might take to, take the time to get a PFA or whatever the option is. Start asking her to maybe think of some solutions. They're coming from her. She's less likely to yes but them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, could certainly do that as well.
Yeah. Or ask her what might make her feel more safe that is doable for her in the moment. Let her know what we could do to support her with that.
Can you like encourage someone to just continue to educate themselves with materials about, you know, domestic violence in general? Just, is there something like that? They continue to educate yourself on that?
I mean, there are materials that people could read on. I think that can be a little bit challenging if it's internalized as a way of like, oh, I guess you can't help me. I'm wasting your time. I'll just go. You know what I mean? But I think any way where, like most of you have mentioned, you're building off of her, what she needs, what she could do. And so our role is never going to be, you have to do this, this, and this, and that's how you're going to get out of this. It really is going to be building around what it is that they can do or can't do. And in a circumstance like this, it could even mean sounds like you're not feeling like there's an option right now. Let's connect you with our counselors and you guys can work together and create a longer term plan. So it could even be things like that, so we can continue to have like support with the person.
Yeah, I just don't want someone to be discouraged and like not continue to think about it or reach out, you know.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts with this one? Okay. Number 4, the caller tells you that she has put up with moderate beatings for 7 years. She values marriage and wants her kids to have a father. Last night, in a rage, he beat her 5-year-old daughter when she tried to help her mother. Now she wants out, but doesn't know where to start. Is she doing the right thing? Is it fair to is it fair to deprive the children of one parent?
Well, it's a mandatory reporting issue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's definitely something you would have to kind of discuss with them, that you would have to make a report. Sometimes it's hard to come back from that, especially if we didn't already disclose in the beginning of the conversation that was a limit that we had. It can be kind of a break of whatever trust you've been able to build in the phone call. But yes, you would have to make a report. We are in the practice, I don't know if Tommy mentioned it, but that when we do make a report, we inform the person we're doing so, and we talk with them about safety planning through that. Again, recognizing that it can cause safety issues for them. While technically we could do it anonymously and not tell anybody, we don't want to create an unsafe circumstance. And so we would still kind of talk it through with them.
Is it ever appropriate, like if someone calls in and just right off the bat, they tell us that their children are being abused? Is it ever appropriate to take a moment, get some basic information before informing them that, okay, this is something that we have to mandatory report about, and then doing all the safety planning? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it seems a little sneaky, but it also seems like you need this information to do the right thing here.
Not you. I mean, usually once it's disclosed, we would right away mention that we would need to file a report, and it has happened a time or two where then they hang up. We can still try to file the report with whatever information we have, including maybe like the phone number, but that is a challenge if they disclose it right away and we don't have any information.
Okay, so you're saying, I just want to be like, we shouldn't hesitate to disclose that this is what's going to happen. We shouldn't try to then, dig for, basics, name, that kind of thing before disclosing.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the other parts of the question, I don't know. I guess I'm struggling with, is she doing the right thing? Like, I'd like to replace that with another, like, is she doing the safe thing? You know what I mean? Because right and wrong is such a judgment thing. And then as for is it fair to deprive the child of one parent? That's not really I mean, in my opinion, I don't think that's our place to decide. That's
Mm-hmm.
or to weigh into. So just my thoughts.
Yeah.
So, if it's okay, I want to hear your thoughts on that? Like, how would you respond to this, Jen?
Sure. So we would have to talk about that. We would need to make a report, and that would be one of the first things we talk about. And then from that, I would be sure to mention about, we're going to talk through this together, make sure that you have a safety plan in place for when this report goes in. If you would like, you can also make a report as well. You're showing protective factors that you're caring for your child. Not knowing where to start, we could talk about resources she might have. Does she have friends, family, anywhere that she's able to go and stay? If not, we might have the shelter conversation at that point. And then in terms of the doing the right thing or fair to deprive the children of a parent, I think you would kind of dig in on, like, she's the mom, like, you are doing what you feel is best for your kid. You're an expert in your own life and your experiences. And if you feel that this is what's going to keep you and your daughter safe, then that is the right thing for you. I don't know if Tommy got into it very much, but one of the barriers with people leaving when there's children involved, and it's both parents, is as backwards as it seems a little bit, staying as a protective factor. Because once you leave with the child, if that partner goes and files custody, and now you're forced into a situation where you have to have shared custody, and now this child is alone with somebody you know to be abusive, and you're not there to protect or to intervene, like, that is a big reason why people stay. They don't want their kids left alone with this person. And so even though they're staying in a relationship where they're subjected to abuse and their children are seeing it in their minds, they're at least keeping them safe because they can be there. Because we don't live in a world where the Justice Center often rules for sole custody without, like, a lot of evidence to do so. There's almost always kind of a joint custody scenario going on. That's kind of aside from that. It's just something that becomes a really big barrier for folks where there's children involved. Other thoughts for this one?
I feel like I would want to, even though I've got to report it, I also don't want to pile on her if she's not ready to. I want to, I want to validate, like, yeah, I get it. Like, there are risks there, and it's scary, and I understand where you're coming from. I still have to, and we're going to safety plan and make sure everybody's okay as best we can. But yeah, I would want to validate if they've got hesitance, just to build that trust.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so our last one before we move on to some short videos. A woman calls the hotline sounding very scared because her husband is very physically abusive. She feels like she has to walk on eggshells at all times because of how quickly his attitude changes. She says she has nowhere to go and is afraid of calling the police because she has a green card and her husband is a citizen. Her husband tells her that if she ever called the cops, he would lie to the police and have her deported. And this is a very, like, we do run into this quite often where there are immigration issues at hand, and it's one of the more challenging circumstances to kind of support somebody through.
From what I understand, that even if they, again, we're not trying to give advice, right? Or we do give advice, because from what I understand, they can't be deported because this is happening.
So we don't give advice, we give options. I don't know
Right.
that I, like, say that with.
Right. No, it's more of a question, not a, like, that's what I would do.
Yeah. It is, I mean, outside of immigration concerns, there are a number of folks who are not comfortable calling police for a number of different reasons. And so police do not have to be the answer if you're, fearful in an abusive relationship. And so in this circumstance, if she's feeling afraid to call the police, we could again talk about friends or family she could go to, shelter, enrolling in counseling, and doing some like ongoing safety planning. So we could talk about these other sorts of ways to build up support and help her feel safer that does not involve bringing the police into the picture.
So what you're saying is like the safety plan, you just take that one piece out and you focus on the other pieces that might fit into like her life and where she feels comfortable or they feel comfortable. I don't want to say she, because it could be a they.
Yep. You could also make a referral to like a HIAS is an agency we work with that help with visas. And so if you are a victim of abuse, you can file for, oh my goodness, U or V. My brain just blanked on which one it is. It's a U or V visa that you can apply if you are a victim of abuse. It's lengthy. It takes like several years to get through, but it is an option.
Jen, at the risk of asking a dumb question, are there any restrictions in terms of sheltering based on status, or do you have to disclose names? It means I would imagine there's some liability to house people. I mean, you don't have to report who's living there or anything like that. It's completely confidential.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, like anybody who's entering our shelter, all of their information is confidential. The only information that would really go anywhere is for like reporting for grants. They have an identifier code, and that's really just to like pull statistics and services provided based on like their identifier number. But client names, addresses, like none of that goes anywhere. Additionally, kind of a difficult thing is if someone shows up at the shelter, like law enforcement, other sorts of officials, without like a warrant or a subpoena, we are not required to let them in. If they're saying they know that somebody is there that they're trying to reach, we do not allow them to enter the building without appropriate documentation. So that can be a bit uncomfortable when you're kind of manning the shelter. If you have somebody come up that's saying they know somebody's there and they need to see them, and you're having to be the one to say no. But the confidentiality is really stringently protected.
Just a question about this. Do you all ever have any issues with people not wanting to come to court for a PFA because of police or immigration? Either of those, either related to immigration status or just being uncomfortable.
That is a great question that I do not have a great answer to. I'm not quite sure. I would say definitely ask Tommy when she comes back tomorrow, because she spends a whole lot more time like in the justices, like in the courthouses than I do, and she'd be able to better speak on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else on these before we kind of jump over to a couple videos? Okay, let's switch again. Let me know if you can hear it, because I feel like there might be something else I need to do for volume, so just let me know. Can you guys hear it okay? You cannot hear it? No, okay, hold on one second. I'm sorry, everyone. I know there's a way to add that function. Share sound. Let's see if that works. Okay. How?
Line call. Ring, 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 ring.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is their two former staff members. Erin on their right was our safe house manager a couple of years ago, and then Des on the left was one of our shelter advocates. So they're going to walk through a hotline scenario for us now. You'll see on the side it talks about its first response and legal advocacy, but like I said, they're not combined into one program.
Hi, hello, how can I help you today?
Hi, is this the woman's place?
Yes.
Hi, I need some help. The police were just here and they left and they told me to call you.
Well, we can definitely assist with that. Are you in a safe place?
Yeah, they took my my husband with them.
Okay, great. How are you feeling right now?
I'm a little anxious and not really sure what to do or how any of this works. This has not happened before where they took him.
Okay. Well, we definitely want to help assist you the best way that we can. What's your first name?
It's Erin.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
And what's your last name?
It's Parag.
Okay, perfect. So just to give you an idea of what we do here at A Woman's Place, we are a domestic violence shelter. So we do help with services, counseling, and also legal help, if that's something that you're interested in. What we can do is a full intake, and then I can help direct you in the right direction for the departments that you may need.
Okay. How long will that take?
That shouldn't take too long, but I do want to make sure that we can get this started as soon as possible for you, since you just dealt with a traumatic experience.
Okay, sure. Okay, what do you need from me?
All right, so from you, I would just need to know, where are you currently located?
I'm in Newtown.
Okay, great. So that is Bucks County.
That's right.
And what police department did you say you were speaking with?
Newtown.
Newtown. Okay. And great. All right, perfect. Do you remember the officer's name?
McGruff.
McGraw. All right, great. Okay. And Erin, do you have a safe number for us to call you back?
Sure.
Okay. And what is that number?
908
Okay.
560
Okay.
1256.
Okay. Now, when we call, most times it is from a private number. Is it okay to leave a voicemail stating the name of our company?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great, Erin. And what's the name of your abuser?
Eric.
And his last name?
It's the same as mine.
Oh, okay. You guys are married?
Yes.
All right. Cool. And what's his date of birth?
April 15th, 76.
Okay. And does he currently live at the same address as you?
He does.
And how long were you guys together?
17 years.
Okay. All right. Now, with you mentioning the police department, we do have an amazing team called our first response team, where they will reach out and help assist you. Also tie in the police department that you called and you've been working with. Is that okay for them to reach out to you?
Sure.
Okay, great. So they should be contacting you soon. I'm just going to take down a few more information to complete our intake. And then from there, you should be receiving a phone call from them. Are you interested in doing a protection from abuse order?
I'm sorry, what's a protection from abuse order?
Okay, so a protection from abuse order, I would say that it's sort of like a restraining order. It's just more intimate since this is your husband. Basically stating that he cannot be on the premises or contact you in any way. So that would protect you from him coming back to the home or him trying to get in contact with you.
Oh, that sounds good.
Okay. All right. So we can set you up with our legal advocacy department here. They will help walk you through and assist you with the process as you complete the PFA and even when you go to court. So you have someone that is going to be by your side every step of the way. Okay.
Oh, that's nice.
All right. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and refer you over to legal advocacy, and I also will refer you to our first response. So you should be receiving a phone call from 2 different departments. Like I said before, sometimes when we reach out, it is private, so we may leave a voicemail, and you would just reach back out to us at your best available time, okay?
Okay. So if they took him, will he be put in jail?
So with the police department taking him, if he was arrested, I'm guessing at that time, so they would put him in jail, but if he does end up posting bond, the PFA would help assist with making sure he doesn't come back to your establishment.
Oh, I see. Perfect.
Okay. Now, you did mention that you guys were currently married and living in the same household. Do you have a income source at this time?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you work full-time or part-time?
Full-time.
Okay, great. And I do have a few questions. These are just grant-related questions. What is your ethnicity?
Caucasian.
Okay. And your primary language?
English.
Okay. And do you currently have a disability, whether physical or intellectual?
No.
And were you or your abuser ever a part of the military?
No.
Did you mention anything about a child at all in your household?
I have 2.
2 children. Okay. All right. And then what is their name and date of birth?
Shannon, and she is 6/16/2008.
Okay.
And Bridget is 4/18/2011.
Okay, perfect. And do they have, and is your last name in Parag, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I do want to give you my confidentiality agreement before we move forward with the details of the abuse. Basically states that anything that's said between me and you will remain between me and you on this phone call, unless you mention child abuse or neglect or elderly abuse or neglect, okay? And I will have to report it because I am a mandated reporter.
I see.
All right. So, Erin, if you can just give me an idea of what was the most recent incident that made you reach out to us today?
He came home intoxicated today and started getting more and more angry about some of our financial issues. And then he threw things and put holes in the walls. And then he grabbed me and threw me on the ground.
Okay. I do apologize for what you have gone through. That sounds very traumatic, but it takes courage to reach out to us. So I will say congratulations on being able to have the strength to call us today. We do appreciate it. So, Erin, you did mention a few things here. Physical abuse was one of them. Has he ever stalked you at all? Does he track your phones and where you go?
No.
Okay. And were there any alcohol or drugs used in the abuse?
Alcohol. He uses alcohol.
Okay. All right. And does he currently have any firearms in his possession?
No.
All right. All right. So it looks like I have a lot of the information needed today to upload you to our system and forward you to the departments that are going to reach out and help you get this, figured out and completely dealt with. So what I can do now is provide you with the phone number for legal advocacy, and you'll just reach out to them. Possibly, if they don't answer, leave a message and just let them know that you are interested in filing that PFA for protection from abuse. Okay?
Got it.
All right. So whenever you're ready, I can provide you with the phone number.
I'm ready.
All right. So that phone number is going to be 215-348-0445.
Okay.
Okay. So I do know that it was a lot that we went through today. Do you have any questions for me?
You said that I'll hear back from somebody from your agency and I should call this other number, right?
Yes. So you're going to call the legal advocacy department and let them know that you're interested in that PFA, which is the protection from abuse we spoke about earlier. And then the other department is First Respond, and they're the ones that's going to help tie in the police department that you spoke with earlier, the Newtown Police Department.
I see. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Erin. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. We are open 24/7, 365 days of the year. So if you have any questions, you can always call us back.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Erin. Bye. We still need to do a
All right, so thoughts. What did they do well? What could have been shifted a little bit? I think you could tell a few times that Des might have been a little nervous in her responses, but what are your thoughts?
It felt a little automated, the interview of and that I mean, I know it has to be to get all the intake information, but I don't know. I'm sure with time it becomes more of like a conversation as opposed to like a interrogation. But that's just one thing I thought.
Yes, that was very intake heavy. And sometimes it depends on the person that's calling too. Like some folks that'll call, they'll just start talking and you're kind of engaging with them. And other times it is kind of more of this because they're only giving you little bits of information. So it does feel a little bit more of kind of going through an intake.
Maybe I missed it. I didn't hear, or at least I don't remember hearing them get a safe phone number or instruction on when to call or safe ways to contact them.
I think you're right. I think that was missed. Or there might have been the phone number, but I don't think that they asked about safe ways to contact. So sure, that was missed. The other big thing is it was a little out of order. Confidentiality wasn't mentioned until about halfway through the phone call. And now I'm blanking at the moment, but I don't think they even really mentioned. No, she did mention mandated reporting was in there, but it didn't happen until a little bit later in the conversation. So usually that's done earlier.
I'm just wondering from safety protocol, do you go over like how the protection order is going to help? Like if they let him go and he comes back tonight, like what do I do? Like are they like that kind of thing? I don't know. That seemed like you'd be worried the person would be extremely angry and let go. And like, what do they do?
Yeah, and that's so there was that referral made to legal advocacy, which at the time focused only on protection from abuse orders. So usually the hotline is doing more of like the general, bigger picture sort of information. And then when she was referred on to legal advocacy would go through more of those details. Like, this is what it looks like to file. This is where you would find the petition. We can meet you that, like, if you're granted it, this is how it'll get served. This is what happens if he breaks it. Like, those sorts typically happen more once already connected to legal advocacy. And that's mostly just out of capacity, being able to like man the calls that are coming in and then fielding them to the right places. But if someone were to call and say like, I have a PFA, they just showed up, what do I do? At that point, the hotline advocate would kind of talk through that you can call police, and if the PFA has already been served, that he shouldn't be there. Like, they could do those sorts of things at that point. But since this person was so in the beginning and was going to need to be kind of brought in through the whole process, she was sent over to legal advocacy first.
I don't recall.
Jen. Oh, sorry, Brian.
Go ahead,
What happens if they're calling you and there's obvious imminent danger? You just tell them to call 911? I mean, it seems common sense, but
Yep. Yeah, you would tell them to, if they could hang up and call 911, call us back afterwards. You could ask them if you wanted us to call 911 for them, and then try to get you'd need to get their information of where they are to send the police, but you could offer that.
right. I've in prior employment, I've dealt with situations where people would tell you like they're going to hurt themselves. So are you okay to call the police at that point if it were to happen? Or I don't know if it's too much of a hypothetical, but I've seen it happen before. So
You would kind of want to talk with somebody before you call police. Technically, with our confidentiality, we do not have a duty to warn. So technically doing that by calling police if there's suicidal ideation is a breach of confidentiality. And so that doesn't mean we wouldn't do it. If we're like really concerned that this person is going to hurt themselves, then we would do it anyway. We would just need to make sure that then the appropriate steps were taken to close out the file, make sure we're starting a new one, because there was a breach of confidentiality that happened.
I get it. Thanks. So I don't want to get in the weeds. I apologize.
No, that's a fair question. I will say there's often like, it doesn't happen often where you're having people who are either suicidal or there's a live incident happening in the background. Like, most of the time people aren't going to call when they're in the middle of an incident. They're going to call when it's safe for them to call and they can actually have a conversation. Other thoughts? I was just going to ask other questions. So go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think I heard much in the way of like safety planning with that client, and maybe in that situation it wasn't like immediately necessary. Yeah, I just don't know. I just don't recall hearing much of it.
No, you're right. There really wasn't. And it might have been the assumption that if he's in jail right now, their more pressing need was connecting to services, but there should have at least been a mention of it.
One thing I did like was how she commended her like strength and courage. I forgot exactly how she phrased it for calling in. And like was like I don't know if I'd use those words, but congratulations. But she was like, you're very strong for calling in. And I thought that was really, really nice.
Yeah, the congratulations. I smiled when she said that, because it is that would be an odd thing to say to a survivor. I think that was a moment of, I'm being recorded and trying to like do my best while being recorded sort of thing. But yes, validating the strength it took and how hard it was to reach out is a good thing to do. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, so the other video is like equally as long and we don't quite have enough time to get through it, and I would rather give you guys a couple minutes back than take a couple more minutes of your time. So I think we can kind of wrap up here unless there's any other thoughts, questions, concerns that you guys want to check in about before we call it a night.
Sorry, then I do have a final question. I remember how one of the question was like, do you have any intellectual disability, something like that? Is what is the rationale behind asking that question? And if that client has that issue, like how does the, I don't know, like the process of helping changes? Is there any,
That question falls in those boxes that were all about like demographics and recording information for grant tracking. So if you heard her say like, I just have some grant related questions for you here. So it's really tracked there. Again, to see if there are certain trends we're seeing in our community that we can find extra funding for to more appropriately like address those concerns. Or if they do acknowledge or talk about any sort of disability and there's different ways we could support them to be more accessible to them, we would want to have that conversation as well. Any other thoughts before we wrap up for the night? Okay, well, thank you all for spending your Friday evening on a nice 4-hour long Zoom. We appreciate your time and your commitment to kind of make it through these trainings. I know they can be heavy, so take good care of yourselves, and best of luck through the rest of your training tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.